What skill do I think is the most important as an entrepreneur? That's a really difficult question, but if I could go back and you could only give me one skill to begin with and I had to build from all of it, I can tell you for sure what it would be for me, and that would be the ability to influence. So it's the ability to persuade people. Without that skill set, the vast majority of my wealth does not exist. If you can't persuade people, if you can't influence people to make decisions that are in their own best interest, but that also grow your business, your brand, your company, your net worth, you can't ever become successful. One thing that everybody I know that's a leader in everything they do can do is persuade people. Now, I watch people do that in all different types of ways. Some do it through intimidation, some do it through force, some do it through humor, some do it through persuasive strategies, transfer of energy, you name it. But all leaders can persuade. All successful people can get people to make decisions in their own best interest that also get them to participate with their company. It's the number one skill that I see most people not spending the most time on, is their ability to communicate, their ability to persuade people. And because they're constantly trying to go to a different course, or they think that somehow if their product is good enough, or they get the right sales pitch, that somehow they're going to win. But the fact of the matter is, you've got to become a better persuader. I'm constantly, personally working on that skill and refining it. My ability to persuade from the stage, through the camera here, to get you to make the decisions that are in your own best interest, to persuade you that I can help you, to persuade my children. When I'm negotiating on buying a company or buying a car or buying a jet, it's my ability to persuade people to make the decision that's in their own best interest to participate with me. And so if I was a quarterback in football, it's my ability to persuade the team to work the hardest, to run the best routes, to get open, to give it all they've got. Head coaches in football, school teachers, their ability to persuade and influence, pastors, you name it, personal trainer, they've got to persuade people to do the exercise, or that they're the expert. So it's our ability constantly to influence and persuade people that I think is the number one skill in life. And so if that's the case, what are some of the keys in doing that? So number one thing as a business leader that you should be evaluating is, are you constantly refining, constantly getting better, constantly making alterations, constantly being aware of how you can improve in all of these areas? The thing that happens when I say that to most people that are average, let me tell you what their response is. I already have that. I already got that down. I'm already persuasive. I already can do that. And even as I say that to people, I hear people all the time say, oh, I'm already good at that. Let me be very, very clear with you as a friend. If you were really good at that, you'd be more wealthy. You'd be happier. You'd have a bigger business. You'd have a better family life than you have. So it's your vast overestimation of your ability about that one skill set that is probably going to hold you back more than anything. As a friend, let me tell you, you're nowhere near as good as you think you are at that skill. And the fact that you think you're great at it may be your greatest detriment to moving forward in your life, because you don't think there's this gap between where you should be and where you are that'll cause you to do the work to get there. And so I never overestimate my ability to persuade. I always think I can get better. I always think I can grow. And I know there are multiple areas and sectors in which we persuade people. So I might be really good speaking from the stage, but the question is, how am I in front of 30,000 people or 100 people? How about one-on-one? How about in my family? How about to a group of 3? What about in a boardroom? What about the white-collar people? What about the blue-collar people? What about in my personal life, right? What about getting people just to make their best effort? What about in putting money somewhere? And so there are thousands of areas in which we persuade people to like you, persuade people to laugh at your joke, right? So constantly, when you buy something, persuade them. When you sell something, persuade them. Persuade your children. So it's your overestimation and thinking you're great at that constantly holds you back. You're nowhere near as good at that as you think you are, and the fact that you think it is already an indication you're not very good at it. So you might be great in one area but not great in the others. And so please don't check the box and think you're outstanding at that. Because if someone who's spoken in front of millions of people on stages from 60,000 people to 6 people, who's made millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in business, traveled the world in multiple different businesses. In athletics, I've coached athletes, entertainers, politicians, business people one-on-one, and I coach in large groups. If I know I need to get better in those areas, I would submit to you that you probably do as well, because I'm not as good as I could be or as good as I should be in almost every area of persuasion. Having said that, let's take the business context for a second. One thing I want to challenge you to be as a leader of your business, whether it's just you're a leader of one, which is you as a salesperson, or a leader of 10 as a team, or a company of 25,000 employees, is you must become evangelical about your cause and your mission. The greatest business people have an evangelical property about them. They're evangelizing all the time. They're propagating the strengths, the benefits of their business, of their mission, of their cause. One of the great evangelists of all time is Steve Jobs. There's a great book written by a guy named Guy Kawasaki many years ago called Selling the Dream. And in that book, he talks about the way that Steve Jobs sold the dream of Apple, and he literally called him an evangelist for the cause. There's a great story in that book about Steve Jobs when he was recruiting. He knew he needed to have a CEO of his company, and he wanted to have the best. And at that time, there was a man named Scully who was the head of Pepsi, and Jobs was this young kid in his 20s trying to recruit this executive who had made millions of dollars, and he couldn't get him, and he couldn't get him, and he couldn't get him. And finally, he gets the voicemail back in those days, the answering machine actually of Scully, and he says, Listen, man, when you're tired of selling sugar water to kids over there at Pepsi and you want to come change the world, frickin' call me back and we'll do it together. Boom, and he hangs up, right? He was evangelical about the cause. Sugar water and Pepsi changed the world at Apple, right? And Scully, who's making millions of dollars, he's CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world, looks to his wife and she says, I think he's right. We aren't changing the world. And it was that one cause-oriented evangelical phone call from Steve Jobs, and it exuded out of his pores. Every stage speech he gave, every one-on-one, every board meeting, when he'd meet with their software engineers, when he'd meet with the programmers, he was always evangelical, internally and externally, and built a culture of one of the greatest movements of all time in the history of business. There's great lessons there about being evangelical. The greatest presidential or political leaders have an evangelical property about them. The greatest salespeople do. The greatest dads, the greatest pastors, they're evangelical, aren't they? So you've got to become more of an evangelist for your cause and your mission, number one. Number two, you have to sell a big enough dream to your team, to your company, to your clients, to the people around you, that the dreams of everybody associated with you can fit inside the one you're selling. It's got to be big, it's got to be bold, it's got to be expanding. Number three, it's got to be repetitious. You can't get tired of saying the same things over and over and over again. One of the deficiencies of leaders that are weak is they constantly think they have to say new things to old people, creating new things to say to old people. The best leaders say old things to new people. They say the same things over and over again to more and more new people, new teammates, new employees, new recruits, new clients, new speeches, new groups, right? They say old things to new people. They're repeating over and over the vision and the cause of their business, of their movement. These are great communicators. The next thing, all great communicators understand, whether it's words, physiology, the look you give somebody, or writing, influence is energy. It's the transfer of energy. It's getting you to feel about my company, feel about my mission, feel about my product, feel about my cause what I feel. They're conscious of transferring energy to people because that's what moves people. That's what gets them to act. It's not just the words. It's not just your face. It's not just how you're dressed. It's an energy transfer. There's a hook, by the way. You can't transfer to me that which you're not experiencing yourself. You have to physically be experiencing it in the moment. It can't just be the words you're reading from a sheet. You have to really believe it. One of the reasons a lot of salespeople struggle or recruiters struggle is they just don't believe enough. They don't spend enough time making the case like a lawyer, litigating to themselves about how powerful what they do is. And the more and more you really believe, if you're a true believer, you can evangelize your product. You can evangelize your message. So invest more time in your own belief, in your research, in your knowledge, finding third-party articles, magazines, blogs, things that reinforce whatever it is you're doing that feeds your own belief. That way you can give it to me. You can't give it to me if you don't have it. And so they don't spend enough time. Spend more time feeding your own belief and be conscious of the transfer of energy to another person. There's a great study out right now that I was just reading about bees and them deciding which flower to pollinate is based on the energy the flower puts off. They sense the energy from the flower and they move towards that one, deciding to pollinate that one. Well, if you want more people to pollinate your business, pollinate your life, if you want to attract the right relationship, the right amount of money, the right clients, the right employees, the right recruits, the right vendors, the right support, you got to be putting off that energy because people are going to pollinate it somewhere. You want them pollinating with you, right? And that's an energy feeling they get from people. The bottom line is people got to be, when they get around you, they got to feel something special about you, special about where you're going, special about your cause, special about your mission, that something special's happening, something historic, something big, a big old dream. In fact, one big enough that my dream can fit inside the one these people are selling me. Right? And so this is the key of moving people. The number one skill, go all the way back to the beginning. My number one skill, that if I could keep only one, would be this right here, the ability to persuade people in multiple areas of my life. How do I get better at it? Transfer energy. Number one, feed your belief. Number two. Number three, make sure that it's repetitious over and over again. Say old things to new people, right? And you got to be evangelical and sell a big old dream. The bottom line is that this is a process that never ends of growing us, of growing our ability to persuade people. One of the things about communicating as well is doing it with a lot of specificity. Great communicators, great influencers, great persuaders are very specific and very clear about what their message is. And so even communicating to yourself and leading yourself. I grew up walking this beach right here, this exact beach. And I didn't live like this, but I told my family someday, told myself someday, I'm going to live on this beach. I didn't know who these people were that owned all these beach houses. I didn't know exactly how you got one, but I began to repetitiously transfer that energy to myself about my dream over and over again, literally thousands, if not millions of times. And now someday it happened. Now that day is here, and I live on this beach as one of 4 homes that I own. And so that's how you communicate with yourself and others, that transfer of energy. I can tell you that in my own situation, I'm always trying to, how do I evolve it? How do I modify it? How do I feed my own belief more? How do I sell it bigger? How do I back it up with more facts? The best leaders sell a big old vision. They tell a great story. The best people I know are great storytellers. Remember this, facts tell, stories sell. Most people make decisions emotionally from the story. They rationalize it logically with the facts. So make sure you're selling a big dream, a big story, and then you give people the facts. This is the way we begin to move people in our lives. This is the skill of entrepreneurs. This is the skill of building something big and building something small and building something permanent too, is your ability to persuade. Focus on your energy, focus on your belief level, and focus on refining your message. The last thing is this, say it faster and say it quicker. Less is more. You don't have to tell them everything you know. Leave a little bit to the imagination. One thing that happens, the longer and longer we're in business, the longer and longer we're around, the more and more we learn, we feel compelled to tell someone everything we know about our product, everything we know about the business. And that's not how you energize people. You give them just enough and then shut up. My dad used to tell me when I was a kid, when I'd be asking for money to take my girlfriend to the movies, he'd say, hey, don't sell past the close. Right? He had already agreed, and I'd keep selling them. And sometimes I'd lose them with this extra BS I'd be giving them. So I want to challenge you, don't sell past the close. So of all things in business, right, time management, goal setting, vision, identity, all those things we're going to talk about on this channel are very important. But if you can't communicate, if you can't persuade, you are toast. The last thing I would say to you, how do I get better? There's lots of books, lots of tapes, but it's really, for me, it's modeling. I learned to model certain people initially and then modify. Model and modify. So I would model people, not copy them, but I would model certain people's styles, 1 or 2 different people, and then I'd modify it to fit my own personality. Model and modify, right? Don't try to create everything on your own, and don't try to copy somebody else that's different than you. You got to be you. So model and modify. The last thing I would tell you is, to the extent that you can transfer this skill to other people, will be to the extent that you can scale your business. So it's one thing to be able to persuade yourself and transfer energy. It's an entirely other thing to equip other people around you to do likewise. The best leaders are not just evangelical about their cause, can't just transfer energy. They have the ability to transfer that skill of transferring energy to other people. And then you begin to build your movement, whether that's 1 or 2 or 10 or 25,000 or millions and millions of people. Sometimes your clients can be your top evangelizers for you when they use your product. So it's your ability to transfer that skill. And you have to do that through repetition. The way to transfer the skill of energy to people is through repetition and role play. repetition and role play. Far too many people just talk and teach their teams how to do things. They talk at them rather than work with them. The way you get me to do it is there's no substitute for experience. 100 hours in the classroom is worth 1 hour in the field. 100 hours of teaching is worth 1 hour of role play where we do it together. Getting them on the stage, getting them. When I started speaking, one of the great speakers he was an older guy, so this is going to date him, but when I first started speaking, I got on the stage and I would open up for this one speaker. And when I'd come off stage, he was a really older guy, but he'd say, "What was it like to play on stage with Elvis?" Meaning he was the Elvis, right? But I got to know what it was like to be on the same stage with the Elvis of speaking at that time. And in business, too often we just talk at people and don't let them get on stage with you, Elvis. There's not enough role play. There's not enough engagement. And so it's repetition over and over. Repetition is the mother of learning. Repetition is the mother of skill. It's the mother of owning it over and over and over and over again until it becomes reflexive. Because when the words and the message and the energy becomes reflexive, then when you're under pressure, when you're stressed, when you're down, when the client's objecting, you reflexively respond with your habit. But if you don't have that habit, that reflex, you begin to respond and lose energy. And so the reason repetition matters is it allows your responses to be reflexive under pressure. And then the second thing is role play. There's no substitute for that experience of being on stage with Elvis. I say it, you say it. I say it, you say it. And it's not just the words, it's the feeling. It's the transfer of energy. The number one skill of entrepreneurs and leaders of entrepreneurs is the ability to persuade. And hopefully these were some of the tips that you should be conscious of becoming world class at it. Knowing you'll never be world class at it. Knowing we can always get better, we can always stretch, we can always grow and improve our skills in multiple areas. Hope this helps you. Hey, it's Ed Mylett. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask you to please subscribe to the show. If you just click the subscribe button here, I would really appreciate it. It helps the show grow so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. At the same time, if you're subscribed, you're going to get access to the programs before anybody else in the world gets access to them. So if you would, click subscribe right here. Thanks so much. And one of the things we've not covered that is such a critical part of communication, and maybe more important than even what you say, is your ability to listen to people. It's a huge part of communication. You know, I've taught you before that people don't respond to what they hear or see, they respond to how they feel when they interact with you. And one of the best ways to make somebody feel good is that they feel listened to and that they feel heard. And it's one of the skills that I struggle with the most, which is why I'm so excited to cover this with you today, because quite frankly, it's something that I've struggled with myself, is my ability to just be present and to listen to people. And so like many of the shows, I'm excited to teach these things to you for your own benefit, but it also helps me in owning this material. And frankly, anything you teach to people, you end up owning more yourself. And so very, very excited to cover this with you here today. And like I said, it's not something I've been very good at my entire life, is being a great listener. So I want to get right into it. And what caused me to do the show today is really two things. I had someone join me on my jet a few weeks ago on a pretty long flight. And there was a group of people, but one particular guy who's an entrepreneur, and I won't say who he is, but he spent a 3-hour flight with me on my jet. So he spent about 3 hours with me, about 1.5 feet from me. And for 3 straight hours, he did not ask me one question about myself. He did not listen to one thing I had to say, didn't ask me for any advice, and he talked about himself for 3 hours. And this is somebody prior to that flight that I really liked. I was struck, and so were other people on the flight, that when they landed, and I don't mean that I'm a big deal or anything like that, but they were shocked why a rising entrepreneur wouldn't take advantage of the time of being with me to ask me questions. I think most of you, if we spent 3 hours together, you'd probably want to ask me a question or two. And he did not ask me one single question. And he talked about himself and his life and his background and what he had achieved and what he was going to achieve and what he was good at and all those things. And it was probably true. But I found myself, when the flight was over, quite honestly, not liking him quite as much as I did before the flight. Because people don't like to hear about you all the time. People want to feel heard. They want to feel listened to. And he didn't do any of that the entire flight. Plus the fact he didn't learn anything that flight. So remember this. I know there's the old adage that you have 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and you ought to use them in that ratio. But really, you should use your mouth even less. And so the 2 things happened on that flight. 1, he didn't get anything out of it. He didn't learn anything. And 2, it made the people around him, quite frankly, not care for him to the extent they could have, because he's a really good guy. But he just talked the entire time. And I don't think he did it out of ego. I think he did it because he was nervous. And so that's one thing I want you to check in the very beginning. When you get nervous, I do, when you get nervous, do you begin to talk more? One of the great things about my show is that I've had to learn to listen more. And people say all the time, one of the reasons they like my show is I seem so excited and so interested in what people are saying, because I sincerely am. I've learned that being a great listener is easier than being a great talker. Because being a great listener, the pressure's off you to come up with the perfect thing to say, right? The perfect response, the perfect phrase that sounds smarter or better than somebody. You don't have to do that when you're a great listener. And people's favorite topic, number one, remember this, people's favorite topic is themselves. They love to talk about themselves. One of the things I've found over and over in my life, and my friends get a kick out of this, but when I play golf, you'll spend 4 or 5 hours with somebody when you're on a golf course. And oftentimes my friends will tell me, man, Dave really liked you, Ed. Like, he really enjoyed the time with you, Eddie, so much. But he doesn't know anything about you. And one of the reasons they like me so much is I don't talk about myself. I love to talk about them. I love to ask questions about them. And so it's interesting, when we're done, they really, really like me and they know nothing about me. And they wonder why they like me. But the reason they like me is I allowed them to talk about themselves. Plus the fact, the way I look at life, I already know about me. I'm not going to learn anything else by talking about myself. I'm going to learn by asking them questions about them. And so I think being a great listener has lots of benefits. 1, people will like you more. 2, you're going to learn more. 3, it takes the pressure off you. And so listening skills are so critical. And even as we cover this, you may say, I'm a great listener. Well, let's go through some things and see how good we all are. Because even on my show, I'll be honest with you, I watch replays back of my show, and I interrupt too much. I jump in too much. I finish people's sentences for them too often. And that's an ego thing, almost like I think I can say it better than them. In fact, I'm so bad at it, I'll be honest with you. Before every show, I tell them, hey, this isn't like any other interview you've been on before. I'm going to interrupt you. You can interrupt me. We'll make it like a real conversation. And all of my guests always politely say, wonderful, that's great. I want you to cut me off. But the truth is, that's not how a great conversation goes. It's not 2 people interrupting each other all the time. It's 1 person talking, another person listening until they're finished speaking, and then responding. So this is something I'm not very good at. And so I teach this to you today, not being critical of you, but knowing that it's something I'm going to have to get better at myself. So here we go. Let's talk about some critical steps of being a great listener. There's this thing that's out there too that says, hey, when you're speaking to a woman, she doesn't want you to solve her problems. She just wants you to listen to her. You've all heard this before, right? Men, that's different. Let me tell you, none of this stuff is gender specific. It's not true at all. Nobody wants you to solve their problem necessarily, not right away. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be listened to. Everybody likes to talk about themselves. And so just please remember that. This is not gender specific. Men and women aren't different on this. Men like to be heard as well. Men like to be important. Men like to be funny. Men like to be interesting. Men want to share their ideas and thoughts and worries and fears with other people just like women do. So remember this. You don't always want to just go solve their problem right away. Next thing is this. Always be asking people for understanding, so that when they say something, when they're finished speaking, ask them, so what I think you're saying is, or what I'm hearing is, or clarify this for me. Because this shows how deeply you were listening when you ask for clarification. And what I'm hearing is, by the way, when you say the sentence to somebody, so what I'm hearing is, that lets them know you were hearing them, that you were listening to them. So as I was listening to you, this is what I understood. Help me understand, clarify for me, because this gives a deeper sense you were listening to somebody. The next thing is what I'm doing right now with you. Make eye contact. Look right at them when you're talking to them. Don't be distracted. Don't look around. Don't look at your phone. The way you tell me I'm important is by looking at me. I have a significant person in my life, and one of the things that drives me crazy is I'm always saying, are you listening to me? And she's always like, yes, of course I'm listening to you. And I'm like, well, could you look at me and let me know you're listening to me? I'm not going to say who that is either. But we all have that person in our life who they're listening, but they don't know to let us know they're listening. One of the best ways you can do that is by just looking right at somebody, nodding with them when they say something you agree with, right? Smiling when it's funny, like giving a normal response. You'd say, well, this is basic stuff. You'd be surprised how often you look away, how often you're not focused. The next thing is check your body language. Are you leaning in? Are you welcoming? Are you warm? Or are your arms crossed when you're talking to somebody? See, I have this tendency when I'm really listening, I get really drawn in. One of the things I do is I get very serious. And I almost begin to grimace and make a face because I'm so interested. I'm in deep thought. But what happens is my visual on my face doesn't indicate to them that I'm enjoying what they're saying or that I'm listening very deeply. So make sure that your facial expression, this may seem basic, but your facial expression matches the moment, matches the emotion. Some other people do something different. They're always smiling when something very serious is being said. That's not an appropriate facial expression, and it looks like you're not listening, or it disconnects the connection, if you will, no pun intended, between you and that person. So check your facial expressions. Make sure you're looking at them. Check your physiology and your body language. The next thing is that when someone's talking, the highest form of listening is to let them finish their sentence. Do not interrupt them. Do not interrupt them. I do this all the time when I get excited. Oh, really? Almost like I want to jump in and get my point in before they're finished, or I want to sound smarter, or if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget to say it. Probably the number one weakness in my ability in listening to people is my desire and tendency to jump in before they finish their thought. And what that says is, my thought's more important than yours. My needs are more important than you. I'm done listening to what you're saying. Be careful to say things like this when they're talking. Uh-huh, right, got it, yeah, wow, Because what that does is, it's called a nudge. You're nudging them along verbally to finish. It's like, hurry up, I got something to say. Uh-huh, right. And that nudges them verbally. I used to think that those were things I was saying that confirmed what they were saying, but it was really what was really happening is I would nudge. Better is that when they're done, you say, wow, or that's interesting, or you at least respond when they're finished. All responses are wonderful once they're finished speaking, but don't do the verbal nudges that get them to speed up and finish. Don't finish sentences for people next. It's another thing I do. They'll be saying something and they'll be struggling for a word, and I give them the word. Let them find the word. It's their word, not yours. And you're stealing control of the conversation from them and making them feel like you're not listening to them. Don't finish their sentences. Don't give them better words. Don't talk over them. Don't interrupt them. These are all things that we all kind of do from time to time when we get excited. I'm not suggesting if someone is making an incredible point that you don't begin to laugh or jump in. When it's your pattern with somebody, you're not being a good listener. Also, use acknowledgement statements when they're done. I agree. That's wonderful. That's amazing. Congratulations. Like, do things like that that acknowledge what they said, because when you acknowledge what they've said, they feel open. That's an invitation to say more. But when you don't acknowledge what they've said, you don't give a statement to it when they're done, then they don't feel comfortable continuing to speak. And so ask probative questions. So when you ask somebody, for example, if they're new to you, do you have kids? They say, yes, I do. A follow-up question is, what are their names? What are their ages? Begin to learn the volley of follow-up questions. The more specific questions you ask, the more what I call follow-up questions, the more and more interested you appear to somebody. Let me give you one more huge thing in being a great listener. Where appropriate, you touch somebody. So when they're talking, if they're leaning in, it's an emotional, and you grab their hand or you touch their knee. Or when they're finished speaking, you shake their hand or hug them or pat them on the shoulder. And by the way, this has to be appropriate, right? Especially when you're talking about different genders. Be very careful of this. But one of the ways you anchor in, I'm listening to you, is with a touch. It anchors in the emotion. And so I'll often be careful when I shake their hand of touching them or touching their shoulder or hugging them when we're done or patting them on the shoulder or knee or something like that that just acknowledges I'm hearing you. If it's a guy, maybe it's a fist pump or a high five, right? But it acknowledges the listening and it encourages them to continue. So that is a little bit gender specific, but I just want to reinforce to you that that just shows you're listening. Then there's a series of questions I think you should ask yourself, just sort of a checklist of whether or not you're a great listener. So ask yourself this, in conversations you have, do you intend to do more or less talking than the other person? This is a huge one for me, especially in business or even in social as well. Do I talk more than them in the conversation? If I've come out of a good conversation, I've talked less than the other person has talked. Man, is this a difficult one for me, particularly when you're in a position of authority with somebody, when they're asking you a lot of questions and you're just answering. Make sure you're feeding questions back to them. A great conversation is at least a 50-50 split, but I think the best of them, they've talked more than me. That way I think I've given them more of my emotion and caring and concern than they've given to me. So ask yourself, what are your ratios in your average conversations? This is true, by the way, in everything. In your business meetings, in your sales meetings, with your children, with your spouse, with your friends, with someone you're comfortable with for 30 years and someone you've met for 30 seconds. Who talks more in your exchanges? Number two, when you don't understand what they're saying, do you ask them questions? This is such a huge form of connection with people. Oftentimes, if we don't understand something somebody said, we don't ask them a question about it because it may make us look not so smart or not very prepared. But the way that you really indicate I'm listening to you is, hey, can you help me understand this? And you ask for understanding. I didn't understand what that word meant, or I'm not sure who Bill is that you're referring to. Bill who? Right? When you begin to ask questions of understanding, the connection deepens with that person. Another question to ask yourself is, when you're in a conversation with somebody, Do you often try to figure out what they're going to say before they finish saying it? This is an indication that you're not present with them when you're listening, and you're trying to get them to finish speaking so that you can jump in and say your very important thing. So don't be trying to project forward what they're about to say, because that means you're not listening in the present, and there's a disconnect when you do that. So ask yourself this: do I often or ever try to project forward what they're going to say before they've said it? Next, do you find yourself just not paying attention when somebody's speaking to you? I mean, maybe you are looking around, or do you find yourself just thinking about other things when people speak to you? This is a value issue. It really means that these other things are more important to you than what this person is saying. And when you begin to build a habit and a pattern of truly not paying attention, one of the reasons I enjoy my interviews so much, and quite frankly, my connection with my guests are so long lasting after the program, is because I am so interested in what they're saying. And I'm interested in what all people are saying. If you were my Uber driver, I think my Uber drivers would tell you, man, this guy is overly interested in what I'm saying. And my cameraman, Mike, is nodding right now because he's been in enough Ubers with me to know I talk to everybody. I think people are gifts, and I believe the way you open them up is by asking them questions. And so I don't care if you're a server in a restaurant, my Uber driver, a guest on my show who's worth $1 billion, or the top athletes in the world, my pattern of conversations with people is very similar. I'm interested in what they're saying sincerely, and I think you should just begin to ask yourself that question. Are you sincerely interested in what they're saying? Because they can feel this intuitively. Another thing to ask yourself is, in a conversation, can you intuitively sort of tell the difference between what somebody is saying and what they really feel? Why is this so important? Because oftentimes people wear social masks with us, don't they? And they'll tell us things, frankly, that just aren't true, or don't completely confirm the way they're feeling about something. And so a deep level of listening is you can almost feel what they really sense about something, or what they're really feeling, not just listening to the words. This is a way of connecting with someone. They don't even know you're connecting with them, but their words don't match their feelings. And when you can connect with their real feeling, man, have you not only got influence over them, but most importantly, you've got a connection with them. Next one. In conversations with people, do you find yourself finishing their sentences or supplying them with better words? Don't do that. I have this mistake sometimes where I finish their sentence for them, right? And I think, oh, we're connecting, I'm with you. That's not what it does. It disconnects you from somebody when you use a better word or a different word. They say, you know what, I really was just really sad. Oh, you were just really bummed out then, huh? You've rephrased something for them. Another way of listening the wrong way, I think, is, do you sometimes only hear the facts and details they're given and not listening for the emotion behind it? Just listening for the emotion from somebody gives you a much deeper level of connection with them than just listening to the facts and figures. This is important, especially in sales, when someone's giving you facts and figures back. If you can connect with the emotion of it, big, big difference. Lastly, do you struggle with seeing things from that person's perspective, like really connecting with them, really empathizing with them, really believing in them? This is so important when you're listening to somebody, is to really try to connect with their point of view. Because the way you help influence me is, if I can meet you where you are, I can take you where we need to go. But if I can't meet you where you are by letting you use your words, your emotions, listening for the emotion behind it, really listening for your point of view. Maybe you sell cars, for example. This person's had a really traumatic time buying cars in the past. They're very skeptical about it. You've got to be able to see it from their point of view. This is true with getting your children to behave differently, or interacting with your spouse. It's critical that you meet with them where they are and take them where you're going. So why are all these skills so important, especially from a business perspective? Because this has been very detailed, very granular. The reason it's so important is because to really influence somebody, they have to trust you. And the way you do that is by building rapport with them. So one of the things I used to do incorrectly is I brought all this massive energy. You ever heard people say, you got to bring the most energy? The highest energy person does win. But the way that you really influence somebody is by connecting with them and listening, and then matching them physically and their tonality as well. So when I talk back with somebody, I listen for their tonality. I listen to the volume of their voice, the pace of their voice, how they speak. I begin to try to match, by listening to them, the words they use, the tonality they use, and the volume they use. If they use a certain set of words from time to time, if you were listening closely, if you then use some of those same words back to them, you connect. So this is a form of influence. If this person sort of repeatedly used the words literally, you've heard that word 3 or 4 times. When I'm then going to be saying my stuff back to them to influence them, I'm going to use the word literally. This is a connection word. It's part of the words they love. When I use words they love, I can influence them. This is a huge thing in influence, in closing, in moving people to make decisions that are best for themselves. If they talk at a pace like this, just like I'm talking at this pace right now, and I'm talking like this very fast, I break connection and we can't have rapport. So I want to listen for the pace that they speak at, the cadence, also the tonality. You know, they talk kind of hunched over and quiet. I want to talk like that and a little bit better. If they talk at a certain volume, if they talk like this, I don't want to talk like this. At the same time, if they talk like this, I don't want to talk like this. I wasn't listening for their volume level. We want to match their volume level. And so when you begin to match and mirror like this, use the words they use, just a few of them, don't overcook it. But when they've got 3 or 4 words they use and use 1 or 2 of those words, I can promise you, you connect. When you speak at a similar pace to them in tonality, you connect. When you speak at a similar volume to them, you connect. If there are hand gestures, as I'm listening and observing them, they use. If they're constantly folding their hands like this, if you're on audio, I'm folding my hands right now. Or they pray, or they have their hands down, or they do some sort of a gesture with their hands or shoulders, I will oftentimes, I'm watching, this isn't manipulation, this is connecting with people. I'm listening so closely, I can see their physical moves as well. If there's emotions I hear them go to often, which is regret or sadness, let's just say. They keep telling me stories about things they regret or they're sad of. I will share with them one of the things I regret and bring them with me. If they talk about, past achievements, or they talk about, some material things, then I'll talk about some material things or past achievements. I'm listening for them to give me the language, the words, the tonality that I can move them with. And this is also true in every area, but particularly in influence when we're trying to persuade people. So the reason this is so important is people have go-to words. And so if you're really listening closely, not only are you connecting better with me, but they will tell you the 3 or 4 words they use a lot. Every human being does this, by the way. You do it too. You have a few words you use more than most. And if someone's really listening closely, they can hear what those words are. And if I use 1 or 2 of those words back with you, I've connected with you on a deeper level. The next thing that's huge, by the way, in listening is to repeat back to them what you believe they've just said. Repeat back to them what you've heard. This is what I've heard. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm listening to. This is true when I'm interacting with my children. Before I just tell them I want to do something, I listen to them and I say, here's what Daddy's hearing. Is this true? And that's really been bothering you regularly. Is this something? So when I'm listening to them, they know I'm listening. Use acknowledgement statements. It's not done enough. People love to be complimented. I love to be complimented. You do. So after I've listened to you, after you've told me what you need to tell me, I want you to learn this sentence, everybody, right now. I just want to acknowledge you. I think you're amazing. I think you're incredible. Thank you for sharing this with me. That's awesome. And it might be with guys. You don't say, hey, bro, that was cool. Thanks, man. Man, I always love connecting with you, brother. You're my brother, right? Always do a connection statement. Always do an acknowledgement. That's why I love you, man. Whatever it is, people talk differently depending on who they're around. Someone you've known 30 years different than someone you've known 30 minutes. But the fact of the matter is, I always do connection, man. I love you, brother. Thank you so much. That's why we're so close, man. That's why I love being around you. Whatever it is, you begin to say acknowledgement statements to somebody because it connects the conversation. It's what I call a post frame. After someone said something, the last thing I want you to focus on, children, spouse, business, brand new person in a social environment, or someone you've known 30 years, acknowledge them. Thank you, that was awesome, great meeting you, if they're new, right? I get out of a new, I go, man, I enjoyed our time so much, thank you. That's post-framing what we just talked about. If it's someone I've been with a long time, say, hey, brother, man, that's why I love you, bro. That's why I love you. And then other people, it's like, you always just inspire me. You fire me up. Thank you. I love how vulnerable you are. Whatever it is, I just want to acknowledge you. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. I just want to thank you. I just want to tell you you're awesome. I just want to tell you I believe in you. Do an acknowledgement statement that post-frames what you've covered, and I promise you, you've now put a bow around being one of the great listeners that anyone will ever be around. It's going to make you one of the most well-liked and most influential people that you know. And by the way, isn't that what we're after in life? Being well-liked and being influential. And that usually comes down not to being an incredible orator, but being an incredible listener. And these are the skills, and these skills matter in every area, in building a church, in building a Boy Scout troop, in building a softball team, in building a business, in building any family. Anything in life is that we want to be able to be liked and have influence, and that always comes down to what we make people feel. And more than anything, people feel great when they've been able to talk about themselves, but most importantly, they feel listened to, connected with, and acknowledged. Listened to, connected with, and acknowledged. This is how we have influence over people, but this is also how we make a difference in people's lives. The final piece of the puzzle is this, is that because of social media, we have such an advantage, and I just want to tell you something that doesn't happen enough, but when it has happened for you, man, does it feel like the connection's even deeper. It doesn't matter what it is. is that when your separation from that person takes place and they leave you, especially if they don't live with you, whether that be a client, a best friend, a new friend, or someone you just met, following up a little while later with a text that just says, I enjoyed our time so much. I enjoyed listening to you. Thanks for sharing this with me. And maybe repeating back to them what you heard a little bit of. And when you do that, it cements them. Not only did he listen to me or she listen to me in my presence, but they continued to listen to me after I was gone. They continued to connect with me. And this extends the connection and deepens the connection when after you physically separated. And even, by the way, if this communication happened by phone and you weren't physically with them, for you to follow up after a phone call with a text a few hours later that just says, man, I enjoyed the talk so much. Thanks for sharing that with me. Or always love when we connect. Or you always make me laugh. Or I'm so glad we're new friends now. I feel like I've made a new friend. Whatever it is, you strengthen and deepen the connection with people by letting them know later, hey, I heard you. Hey, I listened to you. So not only doing great in their presence, but later confirming for them, I was with you. I heard you. I enjoyed it. I want to acknowledge you. Man, have you deepened the fact that you've listened to him. So today was about tactical stuff. I know it wasn't the most motivational thing in the world, but I feel like this is another thing in your tool bag that'll help you live blissfully, to achieve your dreams, to be more fulfilled. And it's something that we overestimate when we think we're good at it. When you hear it sort of laid out like this, you think, man, I could be a better listener. There are tactical things I could do better. Hope today helped you out.
So I think that the beginning place is, I think most people don't see themselves as a leader. Just that in and of itself, I think most people don't see themselves that way, that it's some mystical role in life. What would you say to somebody who says, I just don't know that I am a leader or could be a leader?
Well, everybody's a leader, because leadership is influence. That's what it is. And that definition of leadership has served me so well for so many years.
Yeah.
It's in fact in my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, there's the law.
Great book.
You know, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when somebody says they're not a leader, I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you influence anybody?
Sure.
And almost always, I've had a couple maybe, right. I'm not sure, but almost always I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, you have children, okay, you got your family, you got, so yes. Now, it may be a little influence, it may be 8, 10 people, it may not be, but I look at them and say, okay, if you influence 8 or 10 people, you are a leader. See, what people think is they've got to have some kind of a title or position to be a leader. And so they say, well, I don't have a leadership position, so I'm not a leader. Well, you and I both know the position doesn't make you a leader anyway. Right. It gives you a chance to practice leadership, but it doesn't make you a leader. So what I tell people is this: leadership is influence. So how do I increase my influence?
Correct.
Because if I influence 10 and next month I influence 20, wow, I've doubled my leadership influence. And so how do I do that? And it's a very simple answer. To increase your influence, you have to intentionally add value to people. This is where it all begins. So, Ed, let's say that I want to have increased influence with you. Well, my first question isn't, boy, I hope that Ed'll follow me. The first question is how can I serve you? What can I do to add value to you? So I'm going to ask you, how can I serve you? What can I do to help you? In fact, what's interesting, before we had this interview, I mean, it was cracking me up. Right. We were kind of trying to outserve each other.
That's true. Right.
Well, what can I do for you? Well, what can I do for you?
That's right. I was just thinking that.
And it was a beautiful thing, because all we were really doing is I'm trying to help you.
Correct.
And here's what I know: if I sincerely add value to you, my influence will increase with you. That's a fact. So we don't need to make leadership complicated. Just go out and intentionally add value to people, and your influence pool begins to expand. And after a while, I'm becoming quite a leader. So leadership isn't title, position. It's all about adding value and serving and making a difference in other people's lives.
In order to do that, a lot of people are going to build an organization, build a team. They'll be in some sort of an environment like that. Nobody wins alone, it seems like, in life.
That's a fact.
I was listening to the story you were telling, and I'd like you to share it about, there's the analogy of getting people in the right seats on the bus, but you have this wonderful story about when you played basketball.
Yeah.
About at the end of practice, your coach would do something very unique. This absolutely illustrates this point so beautifully. If you don't mind saying that.
No, it's a beautiful point. He would have the first team, the better players, 5 players, play the second team. And the only thing that he would do is he would put we who were on the first team out of position. And he always stuck me. I was a number 2 guard, but he always stuck me under the basket, guarding a guy named Doug Roth that was 6'8". Okay, And he'd, and he'd put maybe our center out there with the point guard. Well, he's put us out of position, and they say, now stay in your position and play to 20. Well, what would happen is the first team would always lose. And he'd sit us back down and say, now, did you lose because of talent? No. Did you lose? No. You lost for one reason. You were out of position. And remember this, whenever you're out of position, you're going to lose. Well, what they did is, I'm guarding a 6'8" guy. They just throw a high pass to him. He's just dropping that belt over me the whole time. Sure. Well, you can't, and so it was a great teaching for me that no matter how gifted you are, no matter how committed you are, if you're out of position, you're not going to be successful. That's why everybody needs to find their sweet spot. What do I really do well?
Yes.
And on that, there's a point that I really want to make, and that is, I tell people, if you want to be highly successful, you've got to get into what I call the top 5%.
Okay.
So you got 100 people. You got 100 people here in whatever chosen profession you've got. You've got to be in the top 5.
Yes.
You got to get there, and you can only get to the top 5 if you're in your sweet spot. You can't get to the top 5 working on weaknesses. You can't get to the top 5 if I'm not in the area of my giftedness. So you got to find out what you're good at, because that'll give you, if you're committed and if you got good strategy and all this other, you got a good team around you, then that'll allow you to get in that top 5. And once you're in that top 5%, you're in good shape. You're going to do very well. And I tell, that doesn't matter what your profession is, you've got to get in the top 5%. And you can only get in the top 5% if you're in your position, if you're in your sweet spot, if you're in your gift.
Is there any technique, strategy, thought you have in order to identify what those sweet spots are for you?
Oh yeah, trial and error. I mean, when I started, let's go to I started off as a pastor. Yeah. And so I had a counseling degree. So now I'm counseling people. Well, it takes me about 6 months to realize I'm not any good at that. I'm not. It's not my gift. They're coming in and I'm listening to them, and then I say, well, okay, it's obvious. Here's your issue. Here's 3 things. And I write on a piece of paper and hand it to them and say, now go be healed. You know what I mean? Go be healed. And the next month they'd come back in. I'd say, now, okay, what are we in here for? well, I've got this problem. What's the problem? I heard last month. You know what I'm saying? Well, did you do the 3 things? No, I didn't do the 3 things. Oh, you go back. Well, it wore me out. I wore them out. I wasn't any good. But that's what I was trained in. But it wasn't giving me the results. And one day, it took me it really took me 3 years. One day I realized that when you counsel people, you work on their weaknesses, and when you equip people, you work on their strengths.
Oh, that's good. Oh.
And the moment I went from working on weaknesses to working on strengths, I was a rock star with strengths, because you show me your strength and I'm going to give you a game plan and let's get going, because I'm a natural equipper, not a natural counselor. Yes. Nothing wrong with counseling, it's just not my gift. You with me? And what did they teach me in college? They taught me how to administrate. Yeah. So I'm in my, I've got my little country church, I'm doing administration. Well, there's no return there. My gosh. And one day I'm waking up and I'm saying, wait a minute, this isn't working. I got to go get me some volunteers to do this administration so I can get back. And so it's trial and error. And sometimes I think we go to people like, Ed, if I'm trying to find out my strengths and you and I know each other really well, I may come to you and say, okay, well, talk to me. What do I do well?
Yes.
Sometimes we don't understand our own strengths, and it takes somebody that really is a good friend that knows us well that can say, well, I think you're really good in this area, but you got to find them.
Yes.
And the good news is everybody has gifts.
That's right.
Everybody. So there's not such thing as a person, well, I just have no gifts, and so I'm left out. Everybody has them. You just got to go find them. Yep. But once you find them, that's where, and by the way, that's where you put all of your time in personal growth and development. Because the goal isn't just to learn a lot of things. I know a whole bunch of people, they're very knowledgeable, but they're not very successful.
That's right.
So what you got to do is you got to say, I'm going to stay in the area of my strengths.
Yes.
And so when at 27, when I decided I was going to speak and maybe write some books, I asked myself a very simple question. What are the areas that people need to excel in to be successful? And I came up with 4 areas.
Okay.
Relationships. If you can't get along with people, hello.
Right.
Equipping. If you can't develop a team, you may have personal success, but you're not going to have you're not going to compound success because you don't have people helping you. An attitude of overcoming adversity and difficulty, the getting back up, not quitting, that whole process, and leadership, the ability to influence people. And at 27, I said, those are the 4 things I'm going to spend my life. And if you'll look at my books, almost all of them are in relationships, equipping,
true.
attitude, and leadership.
It's true.
And I found what I found the sweet spot for people to success.
Man.
And so I wrote all my books in those areas.
I'm going to tell you something. I've read of the majority of your books.
Thank you.
And there was a window of time where I read every single one as they were coming out, and now I'm back in that cycle again with you. And for me, the last couple minutes were really valuable because I'm obviously acknowledged like you are as a good leader, and
Sure.
But in my own mind, I've wondered whether I am sometimes, because I'm not a great counselor either. And I mean that, like when people are looking for counsel from me, but what I am, I do feel like I'm really good at identifying giftedness in people.
Yes.
I see giftedness. I think I'm good at equipping people. And so leaders come in different shapes, sizes, and forms. That was just really a good validation just for me, and I think it would be for certain people listening to this, because I think also sometimes people that are really good at executing themselves potentially maybe struggle with counseling people on to do things, but they're great at they could be great at equipping
Oh,
them to do them.
absolutely, absolutely. And what I found is successful people are really good at finding their gifts, getting in their gift zone, and then just really staying there and becoming successful.
I think they're happier too.
Oh yes, but successful leaders, there's the difference. Successful leaders have the ability of what you just described, Ed, of finding the sweet spot for other people and getting them in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And that's where the return is.
That's right.
I've spent my life, after I discovered what my strengths were, now I'm just helping other people find their strengths, because there's nothing more empowering to a person than to find out that they are good at something and then being equipped and taught how to do it well.
That's honestly what you just described is what I enjoy doing most of my life.
That's
and what
why
I
you're a
think
leader.
Well, I hope
very
I'm
good
working
leader.
on it. Yeah, thank you. I just want you to know something. Like the whole interview, everything we're doing today, that wasn't valuable for me because I've struggled even myself. Like, why am I? That's an element of my ability with people that's just limited. I'm not great at counseling people, but I am good at equipping them. So it's just a distinction that I really appreciate. One other thing about teams, and then I want to talk about the new book. But one thing I want to talk about on building teams and having teams is, I have probably talked about the law of the catalyst.
Oh yeah.
In my life in business that you've talked about in various different books.
Yes.
Both identifying them in organizations so that they can grow, and also wanting to be identified as one, as someone coming through an organization.
Yes.
Could you just talk about, most people listening to this are familiar with your work, but obviously there are people that aren't as well. So what is that law of what is a catalyst in an organization? Why is it important? Why do you want to be one?
Well, Ed, that's out of my book, The 17 Laws of Teamwork. And basically, that chapter is about the fact that good leaders have the ability to make things happen. And so when people look at me and they say, okay, John, I'm looking for maybe a potential leader, what's the first thing I look for? The first thing I say for them to look for is, look for somebody that makes things happen.
Yes.
Because but there's a whole bunch of people, they're wondering what happened. You know what I'm saying? And they're not the one you want to recruit. Right. So I say, go find, because here's what I discovered. If you can make things happen for yourself, you now have the credibility to make things happen for other people. Whoa. If I'm not successful, there is no appeal for you to follow me. I tell people all the time, success is the credibility of a leader to lead. Because you think about it, no one ever got, nobody ever said, oh my gosh, I'm financially in deep weeds. Oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna go call my buddy Joe. He's been bankrupt 3 times. Hey Joe, help me. No, you don't follow Joe. Joe's been bankrupt 3 times. You got to go find somebody that's successful with money.
So
I'm going to get a divorce. Oh my gosh, I'm going to call Jack. He's been divorced 4 times. Jack, help me with my marriage. You see, people, when they need help, the first thing they think about is who is better than me that I can follow. And so the credibility of a leader as far as to lead is that they're successful. I mean, if I'm successful, I say, hey, I'd want to join my team. Well, of course. I mean, if LeBron James was in the room right now, LeBron says, we're going to play a little basketball, and LeBron says, I'll pick, and then John will pick. Well, when LeBron's there, you've got your hand up and say, LeBron, pick me, because you're going to win if you get LeBron. And every time I'm getting ready to pick, you're diving behind the chair.
It's a fact.
You don't want to be on my team. You're going to lose on my team. And so what I tell people all the time is that the first thing you've got to do is you got to get good yourself. If you're why would I ever think that I should lead somebody if I'm not any good at it?
So true.
Okay, but once I'm good and I found my success, Now I began to say, okay, how do I compound this? Well, I compound this by looking at Ed and saying, okay, Ed, let me help you find your sweet spot, and let's get you on this same road, because now all of a sudden, this is how I really build a team. And so the law of the catalyst is all about making things happen.
Yeah.
And that's what I look for. I mean, Jack Welch, his phrase was that, who's going to get out of the pile? He'd say when he's at General Electric, there's a big pile of people in this company. Well, who's going to get out of the pile? Well, somebody's going to climb out. Mark Cole is the CEO. I have 6 companies, and Mark Cole's the CEO of them. And the reason he is because he got out of the pile.
Yes.
He got out of the pile. He started in the stock room.
Yes.
And
did he really?
Yeah,
Mark did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you really? Wow.
And I just took him out last week. No.
That's awesome.
Mark's here, by the way.
Mark's
He's
here,
cracking
everybody.
up
Mark's
over
here with
this.
us.
But he got out of the pile.
Yes.
In other words, everywhere he was, he succeeded.
Yes.
And everywhere he went, he won.
Yes.
And after a while, you just sit there and say, okay, I think I'll let him run this thing, because he knows how to do it. And so for all of us, I say, before you go lead somebody else, just kind of get good yourself.
So right. You're a mutual hero of mine, friend of yours that we were talking about off camera, Art Williams.
Oh,
and
my.
How important is leadership, right? And Art would used to say, and still probably does, say, you want to show me any church, Boy Scout troop, football team, company, I'm going to show you something being run by a leader.
That's right.
And in every great company, the leaders are great at identifying catalysts. I mean, and when you find them, pay them well, keep them, because they're priceless when you have them. Somebody, I'm sure Mark's over there nodding his head that you should even pay them even better. So,
yeah.
But I wanted to say something to you about your books that I think are just, they're such great reads. They're easy to read. They're memorable. He makes points and then backs them up with incredible stories and anecdotes and quotes. And so it's the other thing about your books. They're incredibly, I would say, the information is profound, unique, and deep, yet very easy to, you equip people so well with the way you write it that it's transferable.
That's right.
The information is so transferable. You do that better than anybody's work that I read. I enjoy reading every single book. The problem with your books oftentimes is when you highlight them, you would almost be better off in John's books, highlighting the parts that you don't want to go back and remember, because it's literally just covered in highlighter when you highlight his books. I'm serious.
Thank you, buddy.
It's an absolute fact. I always get tired of highlighting. It's like every single part of every single page, it would seem to be.
Well, I'm a communicator. So let's start here. An educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. I mean, think of all, all my college, all this stuff. I mean, in an educational world, if you're not confused, they're not happy.
So true.
I mean, their sentences are a paragraph long. I mean, by the time I get down to the paragraph, I forgot what the first part of the sentence was. I got to go back and read the paragraph. Instead of short sentences, I'm dealing with a paragraph. But a communicator is exactly opposite. They take something complicated and make it simple. Wow. And so here's, when I write a book or when I speak, doesn't matter. My first objective is to keep it so simple that when I say it, it immediately resonates with people. Wow. In fact, anytime you have to explain what you said, you didn't say it right the first time. So my joke is I put the cookies on the lower shelf so everybody can have some. And so, simple as far as understanding, but deep, because there's a difference.
Sure.
But deep when it comes to profound results that it will make in your life.
It's an absolute fact. What you're
So, I mean, one of the principles I teach is very simple. I just hold my arm up in the air and I say everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything. Everything. There's nothing in your life worthwhile that's not uphill. It's all uphill. Well, everybody gets it. I mean, it's all uphill.
So good.
And here's the problem. You get uphill hopes, but we have downhill habits. Okay, we're in trouble. Got a downhill habit, you're not going uphill. Got to change that habit. So everything that I teach with a real passion to keep it simple, but keep it very practical, and make sure that the principle is life-changing.
Yes.
If you could do those three things, then you really got to go. And when I wrote the book Leader Shifts, I've been sitting on that book probably for a good 12 years.
Have you really? Wow.
In fact, a lady on our team named Erin, who does a lot of content for me, she shared with me, she said, John, you really need to get that book out. And I kind of put it on the shelf and really wasn't too excited about getting it out because I thought, I don't know, this may be a little too simple. But when I started writing, I thought this is going to be life-changing. And now that I'm looking at the book coming out, I'm so excited because here's what happens. We start leading in a way that gives us some success. And immediately we get into this pattern. And what we don't understand is that leadership, if leadership is about anything, it's about adjusting and being flexible. And if you want to be a manager, then nail it, get it straight, do it the same way every time. That's management. But when it comes to leadership, in fact, if you go back into the 1980s, there were no leadership books in bookstores. Right. They were all management books.
Right.
Because you were trying to manage your company, your business. And then things began to change so fast, people were saying, this management stuff doesn't work because this baby isn't staying the same. I turned around and it moved on me. Man. And so I've got to get in front of it. And so leadership is all about being in front. Well, if you're in front, one of the first things you know is if you're in front, you don't know everything.
Yes.
So the issue is not knowing everything. The issue is when you know something, adjusting as quickly as you possibly can. Because if we don't adjust quickly, we miss it.
Yes.
Because it's a timing thing.
Especially today.
Oh, well, yeah. I was getting ready to speak for a company recently, and their theme was fast forward, and we were doing a pre-call, and they asked me, they said, what's fast forward mean to you? I said, well, fast means faster. As you look in the future, if anybody thinks that the future is going to be a little bit slower, or I love these people say, well, honest to God, I'm just waiting for things to slow down. You know what? I would suggest dying. That's what that's probably about the only way it's going to slow down for you. So fast is faster, but let me tell you something. Forward is shorter. When I started off as a leader, we had 10-year long-range plans. And 5-year was a mid-range. A short-range plan when I started off, now I'm talking about in the dark ages now, was a 2-year plan.
Yeah.
Well, a 2-year plan now, that's a ridiculous long range. I mean, that kind of makes you suck air. You say, I think that's a little bit long.
Yes.
So what I know is fast is faster and forward shorter.
Very good.
So let me tell you something. The only people that are going to win are people that can make leader shifts and adjust quickly. And so I wrote the book. I talk about 11 leader shifts that I've made in my lifetime. Yes. And people ask me all the time, they say, John, how have you stayed, I'm 71, how have you stayed on top of your game? And I say, it's very simple. It's not the same game.
Gosh.
Okay, baseball is called baseball. But it's not the same game.
So true.
I mean, you don't go to the baseball game the second day and say, oh my gosh, now wait a minute, that leadoff hitter got a single yesterday. Oh, he struck out. Oh my Lord. You see, it maybe had the same title.
Yeah.
But it isn't the same game.
Yes.
And you don't lead today's game on yesterday's results.
No kidding.
Babe Ruth said one day, he said, yesterday's home run won't win today's game.
That's right.
And I'll tell you what, yesterday's thinking won't win today's game either. So I talked about leader shifts that you need to make in your life to keep you on the edge and to keep you adjustable and flexible so that you can really lead your people well. Because here's what I know. People don't like change.
You're right.
So when the leader is resistant to change, he's going to get into this leadership gravity pool, or she is, that's going to go down every time. Because I can tell you, you're not going to have the people behind you saying, come on, let's make some more changes. Let's make some more adjustments. No. Remember, they're wanting to hold on to what they have. And your job as a leader is to say there's something better. If you'll just let this go, there's something better for you here tomorrow. And that's and that's what the good leaders do.
So let's go through some misconceptions about being a person of influence, because this is covered really in the very beginning of the book. And I want to go through a few of them because they were striking to me. Here's a big one. I think salespeople in general believe this. And they say, if they understand the facts, they'll make the right decision. I even hear good salespeople. And I think these people that say, well, I just present the facts and let them make a decision. I think they are good at other things unconsciously. They're unaware they're good at, that still makes them influential, because it is not that if they understand the facts, they're going to make a change. So that is a misperception about influence. True?
Yeah. And Ed, I so agree with you that the talented, successful salespeople who say that are doing something very different. But how I interpret their statement is that the other person feels that all they have done is state the facts and let them make their own rational decision. we like to feel that that's how people are influencing us, even though that's not how we're actually influenced.
Now, is there any technique to that? That's an interesting point. Is there a technique to that to where if you are communicating with somebody that they feel they have to have the need to understand the facts so that you're providing that like in a fact sandwich, so to speak? Or it's not another thing I had written down here to ask you, but I'm curious if there's a technique involved with that.
The most important thing when we're distinguishing emotional kinds of responses, gut checks, things like that, from information processing of facts is that the facts happen second.
Okay.
The emotional stuff happens first. We actually have to like each other. If you want to persuade me of something, I have to like you before I'm even going to pay attention to your rational argument. And if you're going to try to persuade me to say, get a product or a service, you have to appeal to my visceral emotional preferences to be curious to hear why I might want to buy this product or service. And then when you're giving me the facts, it's a completely different experience because I'm listening to those facts to try to support my hypothesis that this is a thing I should get.
So they're making the decision emotionally and rationalizing it logically with facts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Emotionally first, rationally second.
And then, so if they have to like us, that's kind of called building rapport, so to speak. And you cover a topic in the book on, and it's a word I use all the time that I've not tangibly been able to describe, but I use often with people as I'll say, now she's charismatic. She's got charisma. Now, I guess when I say that, it must mean to some extent that like, I like her or I like him, but you talk about charisma in the book. And I've always thought maybe this can't be taught. You know, maybe this is just one of these inherited, and I know better than that. But when you see a really charismatic, I've been fortunate enough doing the show and, in my life, now that's a charismatic person and they haven't.
And you have that too, Ed. Don't be shy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But there's almost a correlation between one's charismatic abilities and their influential abilities a lot of the times. So teach us about charisma. Let's do that.
Yeah. When I just ask people, what is the number one influence skill you would like to master? And I don't even give them options. The most common answer is charisma. So people really badly want to be more charismatic. But then when I say, okay, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's, people pay attention to you. Mm-hmm. Okay, but why? You can't be somebody like running through the office in your underwear. That's not charismatic, even though people pay attention to you.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
But so what I do, academic research, I'm putting it to the side because the leading model is a 7-factor model that it's not something you can take action on, right? You can't do 7 things at once. What I do is organically figure out with groups of people, what is it that makes individuals charismatic? So I'll ask someone, and you've read this chapter, Ed, so it'll, it's not a new thought or experience, but I am curious who in your life out of all these charismatic people just pops into your head as someone who represents a charismatic individual.
Barack Obama.
Okay.
In person, President Obama. By the way, 2 or 3 of the presidents that I've met. Now, maybe their stature predisposed me to think that about them, their position, but I did sense a certain energy connection with them. That the first person that came to mind.
Yeah. And power can influence this also. And so when you meet Barack Obama, how would you describe, say, 3 traits, if you can, or 3 behaviors that he does that has you feel that he's charismatic? Deep
listening, which you talk about in the book. Unbelievable listening almost makes you have I'd like to think that I work on this too, that they make you feel as if you're the only person that matters in that moment. And that you're valued and that you're important. I think that's a part of it. And I think a tremendous air of certainty or presence, confidence about what it is they're communicating about, they truly believe. I often say sometimes that I don't know that everybody always has to believe what you're saying, but they have to believe you believe what you're saying. Be influential. And I feel like those are 2 of the characteristics when I think of leaders that I've been around, and he would be one of them.
Yeah. So I feel like this is kind of cheating because we sort of teed up because you've read this chapter, but this is also, listeners will know, just very directly, palpably true of someone like Obama. Having the ability to connect
Mhm.
and display confidence are the two key factors for being a charismatic person.
Mm.
And we can do both of those by focusing our attention on the other person instead of on ourselves. And that gives them the feeling of being the only person in
Interesting.
the room, is that deep listening and connection. And this is the opposite of what a lot of people just initially think of charisma as being, because we think of people being charismatic when they're performing or when they're speaking, but it comes through in that connection when they're listening.
So you're so right. And by the way, just so we're on balance, I can hear all the right wing people listening to this rolling their eyes. And if I say this guy's name, the left will, but I would also say it in a completely different way. President George W. Bush was another person that came to my mind, who's obviously not in the same party as President Obama, but in a very different way. His way was more of a kind, smiling listening. There was an active listening. I think President Obama's listening is just a focus on you and there's eye contact level. President Bush did it differently, much more with like a physical touch, acknowledging what you've said, and a kind of a smirk and a smile, like he likes what I'm saying, was being expressed on his face. And I think a confident person, I feel like one of the highest indicators of one's personal self-confidence is they're willing to listen intently, not thinking about my reply, not thinking about what I'm going to say yes, not thinking about what you think about me, but I'm just with you in this moment. And so I want to ask you about kind of a little deeper dive on this, because I think this is just...
Can I share one thing, Ed, that's funny,
please.
just while we're on presidents? And
Please.
yes, I agree with you about all of that. Leaders, especially like, you can't get to be the leader of the United States without being very charismatic, right? And this even extends to Jimmy Carter, who might be labeled by some people as the least charismatic president ever. When I got to meet Jimmy Carter, we're getting a picture and he puts his arm around my waist and he says something kind. Literally, my vision clouded over because I was so starstruck by the charisma of this man who was in his 80s at this point in time. For all leaders, not just presidents, being charismatic, being perceived as charismatic will help you be perceived as a better leader, not just as a more charismatic person. But I find that really interesting.
It's really true. And actually, it's about changing people's minds too. I've not met President Trump, for example. We're going politics here. It's very weird. But just to give you an example, I've not met him, but I have spoken to him. And I've had different people that really know him very well. And I've had a lot of people of mine that are very left-leaning say, I met him and I don't like him at all, but man, did I like him when I met him, because he had this charisma in person. And so there's a quality. And I think a lot of it is this confidence and this certainty. Do you agree that to some extent, once there's rapport, so what you used the term earlier, that someone needs to kind of like you, right? But once there's rapport, is there an element that the more certain person, if there is a connection emotionally, will influence the less certain person simply because of the overwhelming belief they have in what it is they're communicating?
That absolutely can happen. And you're reminding me of something that my coach used to do. So my coach, Mandy, used to be one of the top sales trainers for Tony Robbins. And that was how we connected. And Mandy, in her closing pitch, used to say, I definitely, definitely, definitely know. And she would say it 3 times to close a deal. So if someone is open-minded to considering your opinion, then absolutely your certainty can help you close the deal. If someone is not open-minded to listening to you, and that's why you said if you have rapport, right? But like right now, across the political divide that we have, that's a bigger chasm than ever, being absolutely certain on one side and trying to persuade someone on the other side, your certainty is not helping you, it's harming you.
And I think the reason that politics is so divisive now is to your point. And I didn't know we were going to go on this road, but I think it's worth saying. When I brought up one president's name, that gave an emotional reaction to everybody here. Then when I brought up the other one, it gave one to everyone else. And the reason these political people are so smart is they know that if they can keep us from not liking each other, that we sort of will stay in our camps. And so it's really brilliant to keep people not to be able to change behavior. Let's make us all not like each other, because the fundamental principle of your work, which is so true, well, one of them is we have to like each other. We have to have an emotional connection in order to be open to these other techniques. So in politics, if you can just keep us all from not liking each other,
then there's not an influence issue going to happen with you losing someone who's in your camp. Isn't that true?
You just gave me shivers because I've never thought of this being a national or global campaign to keep us from liking each other. And I'm going to be thinking about that for the next month. Thank you. And something that you said about Trump really struck me, which is that people were surprised. And I've heard this said about George W. Bush as well. So I'm liberal, as are lots of people at Yale, right? And I've heard so many people say George W. Bush went to Yale. So many people say, when I met him, I just couldn't help liking him. And listeners, I want you to actually not just hear that about these two presidents, but internalize that about yourself. This is a human phenomenon, that we like each other more than we expect when we're interacting in person. When you are asking somebody for something, when you're asking somebody for help, making an in-person request, everybody on earth, on average, is 2 or 3 times more likely to say yes than you expect that they will be. And a big part of that is that you underestimate how much they like you.
You're so on this. Like, I watch people all the time. And by the way, I think influence, people ask me, what would you give your children? For me, the first thing is I want them to be moral and ethical and have our faith, or their version of faith. I want them to have that. I then would want them to be somebody who can be influential, because under influential requires confidence, requires an ability to communicate. I think it's the most important skill that you can give somebody. And to your point about, this is something, everyone just slow down, because you may think, well, okay, I get this. How often do you go in when you're trying to get your kids to do something, or you're trying to get someone in business to do something, or even yourself, and not slow down first and make sure there's an emotional connection first, where we're here? When I play golf, for example, Zoe, one of my favorite things that happens is I'll play golf with someone I've never met before. And then when we're done the next day or two, they'll tell a mutual friend of ours, go, wow, I really liked Ed so much. What a great guy, and then this is really before my kind of public persona, but then they'd say, what does he do? Because we spent the whole 4 or 5 hours on the golf course talking about them, because people like people who like them.
Yeah.
And so I spend my time I already know about me. I'm not even interested in me. I already know everything I know and think. So I'm so interested in what other people think. And the reason I make this point is, one of the other misconceptions you say, and I want everybody to get this, is one major, it's number 9 actually, is you say people misconceive, they say to themselves, people don't listen to people like you, like me. People won't listen to someone like me. And I want you to dispel that misconception for everyone. I think they think if I had followers, or I had money, or I had success, or I had something I'm lacking, then they'd listen. But people like me, people don't listen to us. And you dispel that as a misconception.
Yeah, this is such a deep thing for so many of us, based on these factors that you mentioned, based on our race, our income, our age, our education, what we look like, all of these things. And the truth is, first of all, people listen to us better when we listen to them better. And they listen to us more when we put our voice out there in a confident and connected way. What happens when we feel that we don't belong and people aren't going to listen to us, that's really insidious, is we can speak in a way that makes it hard to listen to. I write in the Charisma chapter actually about diminishers. Women in particular do this a lot, but it's a matter of feeling like you're less powerful or lower status. So it happens in all kinds of other situations that men do it. We'll say, I was just wondering, so I could be wrong, and as soon as you start your communication that way, it's easy for the other person to tune out, and then you feel like no one listens to you. And
I also think your mind here, I think the mind of the listener goes, yeah, you could be wrong. Those are actually real words to somebody, and it's a terrible premise to begin a sentence with, or to begin an entire persuasive message with, like, could be wrong, or I don't mean to bother you, or these other things that you say to minimize yourself.
Right, because then what they hear is like, oh yeah, you actually are bothering me.
Correct. Yeah.
And you're taking more time than if you just said the thing that you don't want to bother me about.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the other things I really believe about people who can influence is they learn to say things in more concise ways with fewer words. Typically, when you're lacking confidence in your belief system, you feel like you need to say more to persuade. Actually, liars do this too. Liars
I
will
was
say
just
more
thinking
and
that,
more,
yeah.
don't they? They say more and more because they know what they're saying isn't true. So they add more and more and more to it. And so one display of confidence is just fewer words with more certainty. I want you to give me on this show, I already have your book, but I'm talking about as a listener. I want you to give me one or two practical things I could do right now to be a more influential person. You give me those, I'm gonna go get your book.
A fair request. And what I will also say is the flavor, variety, philosophy of influence I'm espousing is not transactional. And so you don't have to promise me that you'll go and get your book.
So good. It's so true in the book too.
But I'm happy to give you my favorite concrete takeaway right now that you can put into action. And this is a tool called the magic question.
Yes.
The magic question is simply, what would it take? And if it's okay, I'll share a story to help this sink in.
I love this part. It's probably my favorite part of the book. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So this story really struck me when Gloria Steinem told it when she was visiting my hometown of New Haven a little while ago. And this is when she was focusing on the topic of sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been to a conference. She was an expert. She knew as much about sex trafficking as anybody. And then she goes to this village in a rural part of Zambia near a game preserve. And 3 young women in that village had been lost to sex traffickers and never heard from again the previous year. So she sits down on a tarp in the middle of a field, circle of women, and instead of telling them what they should do or giving them her expert advice, she asks the magic question. She said, what would it take to make sure that that never happens again, that no women from this village will be sex trafficked? And they told her an electric fence. An electric fence? They said, when the corn reaches a certain height, the elephants come and eat it and they trample it, and we have nothing to eat. We have nothing to sell at the market. We have no money to send our kids to school. And these young women and their families were starving. So Gloria Steinem goes back home. She raises a few $1,000s, sends it to the people of the village. And the way that she tells it, she comes back a few years later, there's a bumper crop of corn. And since they built the fence, no one from that village has been sex trafficked. So magic question. It's powerful for me. So one of the first things that comes up when you hear that story is when you ask, what would it take? You so often get an answer that you wouldn't have expected. So often it's so much less than you might have been willing to do, so much simpler.
So true.
So the electric fence, none of us are going to think of that because we wouldn't have known that it's not just a sex trafficking problem and not even just a poverty problem, but it's a human wildlife conflict problem. Also, the magic question is respectful. So it feels good on the other side, and people aren't going to have this innate, immediate resistance that can happen to you trying to persuade them to do something. And because it's respectful, you can use this again and again all the time. Like you're talking about your children, and we struggle, a lot of us, to influence our children. This is something we can teach them and help them succeed in the world. They're going to use it on us, like my daughter does. And we can use it on them, and we just laugh, right? Like, oh, the magic question again. Anytime you have rapport, you can use the magic question. And then this is the most subtle part of how the magic question works, but when they give you a roadmap, they are implicitly committing to helping you with that outcome if you follow the roadmap. So in this particular situation, when they said what it will take is an electric fence, my interpretation isn't that the electric fence was the answer and then sex trafficking is done. It's that the women who said, what it will take is an electric fence, are going to make sure that their friends, their neighbors, and each other's children are not going to be sex trafficked no matter what. So magic question, what would it take? Go put it into action.
The reason that I said this is my favorite part of the book, and I'm not going to get emotional and shook, so I want to keep going, but I think there's even power. I think sometimes when you're doing something in your genius, which is what you're doing, writing this book and this content, because you've been doing this work for a while, that sometimes it's even more powerful than even you know, and the ripples are even bigger. Because I've sort of been in the influence space most of my life. At least I think we all are. I've just been aware of it more than most people, right? And so this, what would it take question does a lot of things. I just want to elaborate on my perspective for you. I want to give this back as a gift to you and the audience. One, when you say to somebody, what would it take? It opens up the possibilities of multiple different yeses and different pathways instead of perhaps the narrow one you came predisposed with. The second thing it does is it almost makes you, in the unconscious part of their mind, almost like a Santa Claus figure in the sense that you're in the gift giving business now. What would it take? I'm open to giving to you instead of taking from you. It changes the entire paradigm in somebody's mind when you say, what would it take? Because now it's incumbent upon them to tell you, and you're almost in the gift giving. It's almost like, what's your wish list? It changes the dynamic in someone's mind of the entire conversation, providing you have that emotional connection and rapport that Zoe has said. Now, a personal anecdote. I read this and I want to influence myself this year. It sounds like very premeditated, but I want more peace this year. It's a big thing for me. People always ask me, what could I get someone who's had everything? I want more peace. I want what every human being truly wants. And so I've been writing these strategies down, and I stopped and I used the magic question with myself. What would it take in order for me to feel more peace? Couple things happened. I just want to illustrate that you just said. One, it was much more simple than I thought it was. And two, it was so enjoyable to start to find out what it would take that I found myself 6 hours later, 6 days later, driving in the car, another answer, another thought. My spirit enjoyed this question rather than making demands all the time to influence myself or to influence other people. So the ripple effects of your work and just this one thing is so profound. If people just start asking themselves and other people, once you have rapport, what would it take? You'd be blown away. So I just wanted to share it with you.
It's so beautiful. Thank you for that gift.
Yeah.
And I'm inspired now to ask myself the same question.
Isn't it true?
As well.
Though? What would it take for me to feel more happiness? What would it take for me to start a business? What would it take for me? And you've just you've opened a space when you do this that didn't exist before you said it. With you and other people. Maybe you're in the middle of this trying to get someone to do thing you're doing, which is not the way to influence as you read the book. But the minute you say, what would it take? You've opened a new space you can both go into now, or you on your own can go into, or you and your deity, you and your God can go into and start to fill that space up with the answers. And it seems simple, but it's huge for your company. What would it take to get to this next level? What would it take for us to serve more people? What would it take for us to cure this or that? And it's a powerful question that should be utilized so much more in people's lives than it is. But the quality of our life is the quality of the questions we ask ourselves and the quality of the questions we ask other people. And our emotions come from the questions we ask ourselves. We're constantly asking ourselves, what's wrong with this situation? We're going to get answers that feed us those emotions. What's right? What's beautiful? What am I grateful for? What are the solutions? So anyway, I'm going on, but I just think it's so powerful. There's another part of the book that's powerful. And again, you guys can tell I'm very passionate. I'm having Zoe on, you guys, because let's be honest, I have super famous people on all the time, and then you guys can tell. Then I have people on all the time who should be super famous because of the work they do that can change people's lives. Zoe is in the midst of becoming that, I can promise you, and it's not the reason she's doing it. Okay, no's. I want to talk about no's.
Yeah, wait 1 sec, Ed.
Go,
please. Can I just draw attention to this key principle of influence that you just illustrated with the way that you described the magic question? Becoming more influential takes becoming influenceable. And when you ask the magic question, it's not just that you're showing you're willing to do something in exchange, but you're showing that you're open to the other person's influence.
All right. That's really important, by the way. So thank you for adding that. The other thing you're going to have to deal with is no. And so my kids both, my son's in college, my daughter will be there next year. And they're at that stage where what am I going to do? What do I want to do? And one of them is, do I want to go into business? Do I want to do this? And I've told both of them, I said, one of my hesitations for you is I think that in culture now, the ability to deal with no is at an all-time low, and how it makes people feel and how afraid of it they are. And their avoidance of it, or what it does to their identity, their confidence, their self-worth when they get one. And so then they do all of these things to insulate themselves from never getting them. And those very things they do to insulate themselves from not getting those is the very things they should be doing to get to the things they want to have and feel. And so in the book, you have the power of no and the no challenge issue in there. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So of course, we hate to be rejected. We hate to have people say no. And it may be that we feel it more now than ever, especially in this world where we've been suffering a lot for the past couple of years and just everything is more difficult. But even before that, what happens in our brain when we experience rejection is that our brain processes it just like physical pain. And the same regions of our brain that hurt or get activated when somebody slaps us get activated when they leave us out or they say no or they reject us. We can learn to handle physical pain through exercise, practice. When you work out on a regular basis, you're actually pushing yourself through some physical pain, right? And that's how you grow and that's how you get stronger. You don't try to push yourself to the point where you're suffering immeasurably, but you take repeated small amounts of physical pain to keep growing and build resilience. And this is what I advocate doing, to get rejected repeatedly on small things so that you can handle getting rejected on the big things. And if you are not getting rejected, you are absolutely playing small. There's no question. So you can also, by practicing getting rejected, train your brain to hear that and feel that as a success, even if it's still painful.
Can you give me an example of that, where you could get small no's before the big no? Can you just a practical, I'm trying to think of a visual example of what that might look like.
Thank you. So listeners who might want to put this into practice, I have a great source of inspiration for you, which is my friend Jia Zhang, who has a video blog called 100 Days of Rejection. And a student was a big fan of his and put us in touch. Now we're buds and we do some rejection research. He has 100 of these challenges. You can replicate any of them like my students do. And lots of them are funny things like, you're at Starbucks and you're ordering a drink and you just ask them, hey, can I make that drink for myself, right? And you do it in a charming and friendly way. Usually they say no, sometimes they say yes. Ja went to a fire station and asked if he could slide down the fire pole. And now I'm so sorry for the firefighters of New Haven and the local area, because so many students have asked him, can I go and slide down the fire pole? Just tiny things like this, like go ask your neighbor, is it okay if I plant a plant in your front yard? Like, there are all kinds of creative little things you could do. One of my favorite things a student did was his neighbor was 7 years old and he had never met her or her family. And she was having a birthday party and they had a bouncy house in the backyard. And he's like, I'm just going to go get rejected standing in line for the bouncy house. And this guy is big like you, Ed. He's a MMA fighter. And so it's like a grizzly bear walking over to stand in line behind the 7-year-old girls. And the thing is, what surprises people so much, first of all, about the rejection challenge is that when you get rejected, it's not as bad as you think usually, but you so rarely get rejected compared to how often you think that you will.
So true.
They did let him go in the bouncy house. It didn't break, but this family liked him so much because he put himself out there in this charming and funny way. And he's very charismatic, that they invited Jason back to Sophie's birthday party the next year and the next year. And he's coming back to New Haven even after he graduated to go to her 8th birthday party and her 9th birthday party.
That is so awesome. And it's like, you guys, the way you and I have a real flow, because not only is the no challenge so profound, I just look back, like I read your work and I'm like, I've been so fortunate in my life to have actually done some of these things without ever being directed to do them, that you write about in the book. So I guess I'm saying I can validate with a lot of my own experience your work. And this, I got a lot of no's, and I kind of got in this weird addicted space where I almost got off the wrong word about like, I got another one. And it just started to hurt less and less. And in your overall life, if you're not getting rejected in small ways, man, these breakups, these sales you don't close, the business that fails, that are massive to you because you haven't had any little ones to sort of just dull your senses to it a little bit. And the other thing that go ahead.
You still feel it. You still feel it. It just doesn't last as long. So it's not even that the magnitude of the pain gets that much less. It just gets much, much faster. And because you've had practice, you know you can handle it and you can see your way to the other side. So with something like a breakup, this is especially important, right?
Yeah, and I think what changes is it still hurts, but what it means is slightly different. In other words, it's not the events of our lives that define us, it's the meaning we take from it. So there was a point in my life where I would get a no. Let's say in business, I go, I suck, I'm not called for this. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. This is God's way of telling me I shouldn't do this. That's what the no meant. Or people don't like me, or it's because I'm, whatever. I would catch these massive, unrealistic, silly, nonsensical meanings to events that were so rare. But the more familiar they become, you begin to change the meaning. It doesn't mean you go, this is great. I've never believed people go, I love when I get a no. Nah, not all the time, but it means different things to me. It could mean I'm growing. It could mean I'm closer to a yes. It could mean I'm getting tougher. So it changes the meaning. The other muscle, so to speak, that I kind of built, which I think after reading your work, maybe I've let atrophy a little bit as I've become maybe a little bit more well-known. I've been less willing to do, but I did a lot throughout my life, is you say, just ask. You want to be a person of influence, just ask. I cannot tell you, Zoe, how many people, people always trying to get me to invest in their companies and pitch me. And some of the most successful people in the world, look at this whole presentation to me, and then never ask me to invest. They never ask me to do it. Or I can tell they need something. They're a friend of mine, and they never ask me what they need. And this is most humans. And the longer you go without asking people, the more difficult and mountainous you think it is to do so. So major part of the book is just ask. So talk about that.
Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing to be teaching a class at this Ivy League school where the biggest takeaway that people tell me afterward that they had, I'm getting emails from alums and they're like, I just ask now in my life. I just ask. Thank you, go. But they find love. They get companies funded. They change policies, change the course of history.
Yes.
And it's so simple. By the way, you mentioned that a lot of these things that you read felt, they resonated like things you're doing already. And I believe that a lot of already successful leaders will feel that same way about this book. And what I've tried to do in this book is make it simple enough that you can not just see yourself in that, but you can teach other people. And you can say to your people, like, here's a half chapter, take this one, like, oh, charisma, here you go. But about just asking, scary for all of us. Most of us have some domain in which we're less comfortable than others. Like maybe you're killing it in business, but you're scared to ask for a date. Maybe you are comfortable asking people you know to do favors for you, but the idea of asking a stranger for money would be, you would just rather die. Love and money are the two biggest ones. I don't know if, can I just ask you, because you said you haven't been doing much of it, like, is there some area of your life, Ed, that's harder to ask than
I'm so glad you asked that, because I was thinking about, so glad you asked that, right? Yes, and it's not major things, it's minor things. I would blow you away with the things I'm afraid to ask. I'll tell you, this will shock you and probably most people. I'll ask a favor of a friend on a big business deal, but if I'm in a restaurant, and this is going to sound nuts, but if I'm in a restaurant and my food is cooked incorrectly, for me to ask the server to go take it back and do it, I would never do that, because I feel like I'm bothering them. For me, there's almost a reciprocity connection sometimes that I feel like needs to be there, where I can help you back. Even if I've been waiting in a restaurant, or my wife will tell you, like, we walk into a restaurant, she's the person who goes up and says, hi, we're the Myletts, we're here for a table. I don't want to ask or bother them. It seems so odd, but one of the things you should guard against is, I always think I should only ask somebody a favor or something I need of them if I can pay them back. And this is, as the more sort of maybe influential I've become, the more it's reinforced that false belief. So I'll ask people all the time that I've already helped or that I know I could help. But if I don't think I can help you, somehow I'm hesitant to ask. And my sense is, even as I say that out loud, maybe that's true for a lot of people who walk through their everyday life that way.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. At least for a lot of nice people. And it's funny, like, I'm surprised hearing you say this, but then I'm also thinking, like, are so many other people like you who are very successful and have these same hesitancies, like Wall Street banker who's telling me that he's uncomfortable trying to get a bartender's attention.
Oh, same
Because
here.
and it's this, it is exactly that. We're afraid to bother people. In the book, I write about this challenge that the whole class is based on challenges. A challenge that's called the bigger and better game, that's specifically to put you out of your comfort zone where you have to be asking for things that you can't reciprocate because you're going to trade somebody for something they have that's bigger and better than what you have. And you start with a paperclip or something tiny like that. And you trade up as many times as you want. And anybody listening, it's fun if you feel like it to do this with your team or your family. In class, we start with a paperclip and then everyone comes back 1 week later with the biggest, best thing that they've gotten. And in class, it's a competition to see who can win. And you get to have a free homework and dinner with Zoe. The craziest one is the 2 students who traded up in 10 trades over 4 days from a paperclip to a Volkswagen Jetta.
Come on.
From a car dealership in New Haven.
Oh my God.
And they traded up for a car that they didn't even need, and they donated it to an Afghan refugee family who had settled here. And this is a perfect example of how people are so much more willing to help than we expect. And when we can frame the situation in an appealing way, and especially with a visionary outcome that's something bigger than ourselves, or just something fun. They just went around saying, hey, we're playing this game and it's totally crazy and we probably can't do it, but we're going to try to trade up from a paperclip to a car. This is our dream and we're going to give it away. Do you want to be part of this game and play with us? It's fun. And also these guys, it was happening over Halloween. And so they're wearing fuzzy animal onesies and, they look hilarious. People are so much more open to our influence when we approach them in an open-hearted and human kind of way than saying, here's what I have for you. What will you trade with me? As a transaction, what would be like other teams of people will do transactional trades where they're trying to find people. Okay, I have a paperclip who has paper that they need to clip. Okay, you have paper. I have a paperclip. What will you trade with me? Okay, you got a stamp. I'll trade you for a marker. And what happens to those people, by the way, is they end up with giant pieces of trash from somebody's basement. And they'll get like a collection of ugly mugs or like a 14-foot oar from a rowboat that got lost.
So my favorite part about what you do that's different than everyone else's way they teach influence is this right here, which is that it's not transactional. I think a lot of times, I've had the blessing of some success as an entrepreneur, and I think people think that means I was a very transactional person. Nothing could be further from the truth. I just want to elaborate on what you said. Like, it's just so good to have someone finally saying the right stuff, the true stuff. And by the way, I've learned a ton in this book. I don't ever want to think, oh, it confirmed everything I do. No, I learned a ton in this book that I did not know. There are some things in the book I went, yep, I've done that. Yes, that's true. But there's a bunch I learned. But one of them is I'm not transactional. When you approach somebody on a transactional basis, here's what I've always felt like. They immediately don't even see you as human. They see you as almost an object because you've objectified them. And now you've lost all of whatever that influence could have been because you're no longer a human being. You're no longer vulnerable. You're no longer somebody I want to help or root for. And now they almost want to win. They almost want to win it by rejecting you, by getting by and giving you the or instead of the Jetta, right? And so the most important thing I think you can be to be influential is to be vulnerable, is to ask for help, is to be yourself, is to be human with people, is to be as far away from transactional as that you possibly can get in order to be influential. And almost all other influential courses are, well, if you could have A or B, what would you have? And it becomes very transactional. That has not worked for 30 years in life or business, yet it's still taught all the time by people who I don't think are very influential, that really make a very big difference. So now, having said that, there are techniques.
And then went private.
So let's talk about that a minute. I was interviewing Bedros Koulian the other day,
right?
And he's a huge fan and friend of yours, and I know that feelings are mutual between the two of you. But he was telling me that when he was a trainer, that was a really important time in his life because the type of people you train typically have a couple bucks, right? And so these people sort of become kind of quasi mentors. So is that now Because mentoring is also part of the recipe, right? So was that part of sort of the formula of creating you? Like you got the art background, the band background, you've done the t-shirt. By the way, when you're doing the t-shirt thing, were you hustling like, were you one of these guys I would see sometimes once in a while that you're selling t-shirts out of the back of your rig or like, or
No, I was never force feeding it, but
Okay.
whoever wanted to meet up, I'd go meet it. But
You'd
I was
go meet
never
up.
like, oh, this is my clothing. Nah,
Okay,
I'm
you didn't
never,
have
I'm not the
you weren't
pushy
there.
type.
Okay,
yeah.
you weren't that. You're not the pushy type. That's
Yeah,
good to know.
yeah.
Okay, because I think a lot of guys think, hey, to get, because I'm not either. I
Yeah.
come from a family like. The culture in my family is like sales guys are almost like piranhas. Like you
Yeah.
don't want to be pushy. You don't ever want to
Right.
make people uncomfortable. I still feel that way. So that's good for a lot of you to relate to that. Like neither one of us got pushy to push our success, right? We got pulley, which meant what we had was so good people wanted it to come with us, right? That's ultimately, you don't win by being pushy, you win by being
No.
pulley.
Yep.
It's a gravitational pull, right? So
Right.
that's why you won. So you're at Long Beach State. I want to stay in here.
Yeah.
You got this background. Now you're a trainer. You're kind of getting some mentoring. You're also probably making some money.
Yeah.
Right? And so what takes place from there?
So this is crazy. Like, Bally Total Fitness actually taught me a lot because it's strictly corporate.
It's a machine, too.
It's fucking, dude, it
Yeah.
taught me to be the sales savage, dude.
Okay, good.
I remember my director, she laid out 2 pieces of paper.
Yep.
She told me, all right, tell me why this one's better than this one. I was like, fuck, I blanked out for like a cool 30 seconds, but then I gathered, I was like, you know what? All right, this paper is made up of this type of wood, blah, blah, it's
Yes.
better than this. You don't want this one, you know?
Yes.
I don't know what I pulled off, but I pulled it off and sold her this fucking piece
Yep.
of paper, and she's like, all right, cool.
Yes.
Now do that with your training business
Okay.
because your training is this value, and you know, if you believe this
Awesome.
otherwise, then why are you even here?
Wonderful. Okay,
You know?
I want to jump in on this
Okay.
too, because I want to stay with you on this. Because
Yeah.
there's like, I think that guys like you have so many skills that make them successful. I want just you to be aware of them. Another element in any business, so this man's in the apparel business, the fitness business, you have to be able to persuade people. Right? Like that's another
Right.
layer that I didn't grow up with. No one taught me how to communicate. No one ever taught me how to persuade.
Right.
So there was a point in my career where I learned how to do those 2 papers.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, don't you think that's a huge,
That's-
it helps you persuade employees to join you, right?
Everything.
Distributors, like pricing, everything.
Yep.
Persuasion's huge, right?
Yeah,
So
it's huge.
you learn that at that's interesting. You learn that at Bally's.
Dude, it was huge because at Bally's it was cutthroat. Once you're off your probation period, if you don't make clients, and you're out of here.
They will, you not only you're broke, they'll get rid of you.
Yeah, they'll get rid of you. You're done.
Okay, I didn't
and
know
I
that.
ended up making not even being a regular trainer. I was one of the elite master trainers, breaking almost like 10K a month for Bally's
As
at
a
the
young
time.
guy?
As a young dude. There was only like 5 of them at
Do you
each
keep
gym.
any of the 10K?
Yeah, probably like, I don't know, a small percentage of it.
Yeah, right. Not a whole lot goes back to
Yeah,
you, right?
yeah,
But
right.
you're paying your bills at least while you're in
Oh,
college
I was,
doing that.
I was living.
You're
I was
living large
living.
probably
Yeah,
compared to your buddies.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so you're there, you're training, you're obviously getting a lot of business experience, communication experience.
Right.
Because here's the thing, everybody, especially if you're young, this is all part of the journey of winning. It's like, he wasn't a millionaire when he was 20 at Long Beach State, right? But he was making deposits in himself, right? Like all these investments you were making in you through experience, through the grind, through just doing stuff. Like you probably, when you were skating, when you were playing in the band, I doubt you thought, I'm going to be a personal trainer
No,
at
fuck
Bally's,
no.
right?
No,
Like,
never.
Right, never, right? So
Never.
it's crazy. Okay, so you're there. What happens from there? Like, where do we go?
So the clients that I met, as I became more of like the master trainer, what they called it,
Yeah.
I didn't have to go out and prospect much. So they used to make me prospect, like go find your own clients. They never fucking gave it to you. You
Right.
had to go close the deal yourself, walk up to strangers. I did all that.
In the gym or out of the gym?
Both.
Both, okay.
However you can get them in the office.
Okay.
You know, and
Okay.
sell them on it. So I did so good at that. I built such a great clientele. And now when the leads actually came in that weren't for me,
Yes.
that were high paying leads,
Yes.
like these professionals that would come in that need help,
Yep.
I would get fed those leads and close them on the deal.
Close 'em.
You know? And in that process, these professionals, like me being a tattooed,
Yeah.
you know, minority type of person, it's like,
Yep.
okay, how the fuck do I speak to these guys
How do you
without
close
scaring
this
them off?
45-year-old white male
Exactly.
banker guy
Exactly.
or doctor, right?
Because they come in and they have their offense up, you know,
Sure.
the red wall. You got to
Yep.
bring that shit down and be able to relate to them.
Yes.
And see what the problem is.
I'm curious, everyone's relating to this right now, right? Like, what would you do? How would you do that? Was it
Yeah.
asking them questions about them, or how would
Asking
you do it?
questions and just keep kind of relating why they're here and how I can help them.
Okay.
And that I'm not this dude that's just, you know, here to sell you on shit. Like I can actually change your life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So once I learned that, and I'm talking to this a surgeon to a lawyer to like a college student, you know, so I was able to maneuver and communicate
That's massive,
and,
bro.
and bring down these red wall barriers and connect with them on a personal level.
And it was basically how you could help them, how you could connect with them.
Yeah,
Bro,
exactly.
see, this is interesting. I did all this reading about you. This is the part of the story I didn't know, and it helps me piece together your success.
Yeah.
Because I've always felt like, I don't care what the business is. I don't care if you're in the software business. You have to be able to persuade and communicate to people.
For sure.
That's interesting
Yeah,
to me.
it's hard because I've done a lot of interviews here and there, but you know, you live life. There's 365 days in a year.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes on.
I know.
Even with just like 8 hours of the day that you
Yeah.
can't even explain for you know, a full 2-hour interview.
Yeah,
You know, so
I'm really glad because it helps me piece together you because I have this overriding belief like you have to learn how to connect with people.
Yeah.
And I've met you, and I think one thing I will just tell you that I see about you too is like I think you have a genuineness about you. Like you're instantly likable, man. Like you're super humble. Like you don't even know how successful you are.
Appreciate that,
And
yeah.
I love that about you, bro. Like I hope I have that a little bit. Like I don't think you know how amazing what it is you've already accomplished because I think you're in the I think in your mind you're like still in the beginning, which is huge. I think I'm still in the beginning too, right? Like, and I'm 17 years older than you. I still think I'm in the beginning anyways. So you're there, you're training, you've learned to communicate, you've learned to close, right? Now you got some mentors. What we're getting close to Live Fit, but we're not there yet,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And also, I assume you're probably still connected to the way you grew up a little bit too,
100%,
right? So you still
100%.
so you still got buddies of yours getting in some trouble. Some are
Yep.
successful. Some are probably getting even locked up once in a while.
Yep,
You probably
yep.
even lose a friend here
Yep.
and there, right? That's killed, right? I
Yeah,
mean, you're in this
yeah.
environment that's most of us that didn't grow up in it, but grew up close to it. You know, I know it's almost like you almost lived in a minor war zone, a minor combat
Oh,
zone, and you're still
100%.
connected to that, right?
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, were those were you pulled back into that all the time, or were these new associations kind of sculpting you and shaping you at the same time as you still had your homies from where you grew up at the same
No,
time?
at the time, like there's that stereotype where like the gang activity is like heavy and they'll put you in. Like no, once you get to like a
You were
certain
way past
level,
that.
yeah, and the guys that are still doing it, they respect you as like more of a friend. Like oh, okay, you know,
Yes.
what's going on around? Let's catch up. And then after
They're
that,
proud of you almost to some
exactly.
extent, right?
And then
Yeah.
when you're done hanging out, then they'll go back to do their thing. You do your thing. You know,
Okay.
it's kind of like we already lived our separate ways. Because when people do the dirt stuff, that's when we're young. You know.
Yeah.
But once you start making real money and making a living,
Yep.
everyone respects one another. You know.
My other friends who are athletes who come from those environments too tell me that there becomes a transition where they're like really rooting for you and proud of you that you
Yes,
come
yeah.
from where they come from. There's
Yep.
some truth to that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I even asked these guys. I brought one of my friends as like one of the OG gangbangers,
Yeah.
head like shot caller, and he came down to the warehouse and he was so proud. Like
Yeah.
he was genuinely proud.
Yep.
Because he has a family of his own. He's like, dude, I'm fucking.
Yeah.
You know.
I think a lot of the things too from these communities, because I think Long Beach is part of your story. I think it's always going to be. I think being Cambodian is part of your story. But I don't come from that kind of a community, but I have many friends who do, especially the athlete guys, especially, by the way, some of them from Long Beach. Long Beach Poly is like one of the great basketball schools in the country, right? And I think that sometimes a lot of the people that grow up in those communities, at least my sense is, their actual family isn't intact all the time, and so there's almost a family relationship to the community. Like they're all rooting for you. Is
100%.
that
Yep.
true?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I could relate
Yeah,
for sure.
I think there's a lot of people out there that are just like literally proud and rooting for you all the time.
Because there's
support
people you see every day that I used to skate with or just hang out with, like on the streets, like they almost become family just
Yeah.
because our actual family's working or doing something to
Yep.
put food on the table, you know?
And I think that's part of the success of your brand.
Yeah.
I think that the great brands now, and we're going to get into that in a minute, they're not just communities or cultures, they're almost like a family of people that all sort of support the same culture, the same way of thinking, the same thought
Yeah, for
processes.
sure.
I think that's what you have, brother.
100%.
I do. I think it's almost like a family. I don't think I think brand is like minimizes what it is. Like the people I know that wear your stuff, like they're proud of it, like
Yeah.
a dude you grew up with. Like it's not like, hey, when I meet guys at the gym that wear your stuff, they're aware they're wearing it. Like once in a while people walk up to me like, hey, nice hat. I'm wearing some Clover hat. I'm like, is that what I'm wearing? You know, it's nothing to me, right? But when guys wear your stuff, I'm like, hey, I'm about to interview that dude. They're like, oh, bro. Like they go right into it. They know they're wearing it. They're proud they're wearing it. It's like a family brand. It's like, and by the way, that's huge
that's
in
crazy.
business. Okay, so let's get into it. Bally's.
Yep.
You end up eventually, how do you end up getting to where you like start a store or something, don't you? Like
Yeah, so
Okay.
After Bally's, obviously I realized like, I was making good money, but I'm like, dude, I can make a little bit more if I left and you know, went into private trading. That's
Private personal training.
private
Okay.
personal trading,
Okay.
yeah. So running my own business,
Okay.
training multiple clients at one time, running boot camps, maximizing my time and
All right.
money, you know?
Okay.
So I learned that actually looking up Bedros'.
Bedros, the boot camp idea.
Exactly.
Okay.
His business model and all that stuff. So
Okay.
this was before he even knew who the fuck I was, you know?
Okay.
So I took that model and literally fucking nailed it to the T. I was in college making way more fucking money than anybody I knew around me, and I was like, fuck, what am I doing, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just kind of was doing it for my parents at the time.
Yep.
So I stayed doing that, and then this random opportunity came up with my buddy Bruce Soth. He owned this T-shirt store in Long Beach off of Molino and Anaheim.
Okay,
called,
not a good area, by the way.
yeah, not a good. It's
Right.
fucked up over there, and it's
Yep.
still fucked.
Yep.
He still owns it. It's pretty good.
Yep.
Or he does pretty well. But it was like a shop that offered just like $5 or $10 like blank T-shirts, or you'd make like custom one-off shirts, you know,
Okay.
that people go in and buy.
Yep.
And to sell like
So retail.
Dickies, yeah,
Okay.
retail store.
Okay.
And at the time, he gave me this offer to like buy into it. I was like, all right, sure. So
You're entrepreneurial then. Okay. So you buy into a T-shirt store in a pretty rough area where you grew up.
yeah, because I
Okay.
seen but people would just see like, oh, that's fucking rough area. I
Yep.
seen the money because over there in the hood, what
Yep.
do people do every morning? This is a trip every morning. They would go in, our regular customers, and buy a brand new white T-shirt every morning. They don't wash it, so this is maybe something new you gotta learn. They
Yep.
don't wash their Pro 5 T-shirts.
Okay.
So just buy a new one
Every day.
every day. Yeah.
And throw it out.
Yeah,
Buy
throw
another
it
one the
out.
next day.
Yep.
So you'd have like regular traffic, like someone's going to a Starbucks to buy a cup of coffee. They're buying a white
Yes.
T-shirt from you.
Yep.
I
fucking
never knew
promise
that.
you. Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay,
It's
I
the
did not
weirdest
know that.
shit when I tell people. I'm like, yeah,
Okay.
no, that's why when you see like, you know, some like gang bang dudes that wear a white T-shirt, they'll still have the crease just from the packet.
I was going to sound
They didn't
stupid. I'm
iron
like,
it.
how's
No,
this
that's-
guy have such a beautiful shirt every freaking time? So
Yeah.
that's why it's a brand new shirt
It's a
that's
brand
worn
new
once.
shirt. Exactly. They just open it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's why that location works. That's why like it's actually a pretty damn
I saw
good
dollar
location.
signs. I was like, hey, cool.
And
this
you
is
knew
gonna
that
work.
because you grew up in it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. I'm learning a lot here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then with that, I obtained the T-shirt store with my buddy Bruce, and then I wanted to do this whole Long Beach brand as well in there. I was like, I think I can sell some cool fucking Long Beach logo stuff because Long Beach has a lot of pride. People within the city like to rock,
Yep.
you know, Long Beach. So I started making designs and created this LB clothing brand, and fucking it took off in the store. People would just come in
Inside the store.
inside the store,
Okay.
yeah. And I obviously started marketing it on like Facebook
Okay.
and MySpace at the time. There was no Instagram
So,
yet.
so you were already dabbling in the social media deal, which
Yeah.
is huge to your success now, which we'll get to. But okay,
Yep.
so were your training clients wearing this stuff, or this was like a local brand thing?
Into what stuff?
So the in your store, the shirt you were selling in your store that you created, right? Was that was that something the people you trained wore, or like local dudes would
Just
come in and
local
buy?
dudes,
Okay,
yeah, local Long
dudes.
Beach dudes, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
but then over time, when I was running my private training business, I had all this graphic design skills. I had all these other like video editing skills, photography skills. I had my trading business as well.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna design some stuff for my clients. What's a catchy slogan?
Okay.
I was like, all right, Live Fit.
You're kidding me.
Yep. So I fucking
Are
designed.
you serious?
Yeah, this is how I started.
Live Fit started for the people you were training?
Yep, all my clients. So I had RP Fitness, and then
Okay.
my slogan was Live Fit. So I just made this collection of like a T-shirt design and a black zip-up hoodie
Yep.
that we still sell today.
Okay.
That were the first, I guess, line that was offered to my clients first. So then they
Wow.
started wearing it, and then at the time there was only Facebook.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, this is fucking cool. Let me film this, you know,
Yes.
when we're doing like boot camps or group training, because everyone's having fun and everyone's wearing the same shirts, this and that. And not only did I post it, but because they were my clients that were part of the community or my training business, they wanted to post it too because they were wearing the shirts. Like they wanted to show off to their friends, like, look what I'm a part of. So it just kind of went viral in the local community, and then it just snowballed from there because then people were like, okay, I'm not training with you, but I want that shirt. How do I get it?
You're kidding me.
Yeah, so then it kind of just
When was
fucking
this? What
snowballed.
year are you talking about?
Probably like 2011.
Okay,
12.
so you're like, all this stuff we see today that everybody does as acceptable, which is film their brand, make it
Yeah.
fun, you did before everybody
back.
was doing it.
Way back.
What made
yeah.
you think how did you know to do that?
I don't know, I just thought that shit was cool.
You thought it was cool? Are you
That was
kidding
cool. I was
me?
like, hey man, this shit's tight. I want to fucking let's film it. You know?
You know that's genius, right? Like
I
that's no, not I guess. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was
so-
always like a marketing person.
Yeah, you
everything. If you wanted to look at my brand or whatever I'm about, I wanted to make it look as cliche as it sounds, I wanted to make it look perfect or make it look cool, you know. So how do I do that? I think I'm gonna film this, you know, and show my friends what I'm doing, you know, that I'm, you know.
And it went a little bit viral through their posts and them wanting it. Then people who don't train with you want a little piece.
Yeah.
So you have that going on the sort of viral social media virtual world, and you have this physical store that you're selling local stuff to as well, right? Tell them real quick, like, because I didn't know this, and you would get business spikes at this store through tragedy almost, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I want people to understand this because there's all these brands that are massive that are what I don't know the right word for it, but I'll just call it like urban driven or city driven or culturally driven brands, right? That a lot of people don't understand, whether that be even like music like Jay-Z, or we were talking about Damon John earlier with FUBU, or what was Russell Simmons' brand? Baby Fat, right? Or these other brands like, so you would have a spike in business in your store and in your shirt when what type of stuff would take place?
When murders would happen.
When murders would happen.
It was just,
Why?
Like I said, there's heavy gang activity. So one of the things we did too were just one-off custom shirts.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was rest in peace or in loving memory of.
Because in gang culture, if someone dies, what happens usually?
They retaliate or whatnot.
They retaliate, but they also make I didn't know this. There's like rest in peace shirts.
Yeah, they'll make rest in peace shirts just for the lost ones, the loved ones, you know.
So you would hear like there's noise, like someone was killed, there's going to be retaliation, and you'd literally be thinking business is going to spike.
Yeah, me and my buddy Bruce were like, dude, we're going to be busy in the next couple of days, man, because
That's bananas.
this person got smoked. They came in, made a bunch of shirts, but we know this other person has a green light on them, and we're like, fuck, all right, he's about to die, and then sure enough, it sucks,
gosh.
but he dies like a week later, and we're just,
You guys,
it's just that, you know, in that cycle of,
Yes.
of bubble,
Yes.
dude.
That's amazing to
Yeah,
me.
it's
And
wild, man.
so you, what an unreal story, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
So I'm curious. I don't know this. Like, so you have this store. You got So it's interesting. You got all these things going. So you're training. You got this culture going where now Live Fit's starting. You got the store. Guys are coming and buying their shirts every single day. Plus, someone dies, business spikes because you're making those shirts. Plus, your normal brand that's local. Plus, the other stuff you sell. Like, do you ever get? I don't know. I always think about this. I go into when I'm driving home from LA back here, right? Or when I was even a kid, I'd go out and play baseball at Long Beach State. I go to a game there, or I go to or even Cal State LA. You know, you drive back from there, you go get gas at a gas station. You grew up in Diamond Bar, where I grew up. It's like, hey man, this is a rough gas station. This is a rough. I'm more careful, right? Like I go into where you grew up. And did you ever get robbed?
Yeah, actually, when I was, they'll rob you. They don't care what fucking age you're at. I was, I think, 13, 14. It was on 11th and Temple. It's funny you asked me. I was with probably 12 of my friends just hanging out in front of my buddy's house. And these two Asian guys, they're Cambodian as well, because there's two gangs in Long Beach that, or two Cambodian gangs, and they beef with each other too.
Okay, still to this day?
Yeah, still to this day. There was these two gang members. They walked by and they looked at me. They're a little older, and I was like, that's kind of weird, you know? Why the fuck did they look? And they walked to the end of the block, and then they decided to walk back. I was wearing this gold Buddha necklace. I didn't know at the time. You know, my mom gave it to me, and then
Your mom gave it to you?
Yeah, and then these two guys came up, and then one of them, the second time they walked back, he took a knife out, he put it on my neck, and he snatched it, and all my friends were just like, we kind of just knew. We're like, fuck, all right, what the fuck we do, you know?
Yep.
I even called my friend that was in that gang too. I was like, hey man, can you get my fucking necklace back? My mom's gonna fucking kill me, you know? She's gonna beat my ass, because that's just what, if you get jacked, they're gonna get mad at you.
Yes.
But then they're like, nah, dude, I can't. If they're just doing that, that's just part of the work. And I was like, fuck.
Did you ever get it back?
Nah, never. Then it was funny because when I went back home, I guess I never said anything to my mom, dude. This is weird. I never fucking talk about this shit. She never asked where the necklace was, and it was fucking years later. I was like, hey mom, you remember what I thought? She's like, I knew you got robbed. I was like, fuck, are you serious?
She knew.
Yeah, because I was like, how you know? She's like, she just knew. I guess I was too quiet or something, or, you know? But
your mom, but we're gonna get into Live Fit now, but your mom's like a central piece of your life, huh?
Yeah, no, for sure.
You talk about your mom a lot.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why is that?
She was probably like the only person that, now that I realize when I'm older,
Yeah.
she gave me everything I wanted, even though we didn't have the fucking funds for it or the means for it. If I wanted new skate shoes, she would buy it.
She'd find a way.
When I was young, I didn't know what the fuck housing was. I didn't know what Section 8, I didn't know what food stamps was. I knew you buy this fucking food and this greenbacks, you buy other shit.
Yeah.
That's what my mom said, you know?
Yeah,
So, but I didn't know. I thought that was fucking part of life, right?
Everybody had that.
Yeah,
as far as
so,
you knew.
and then everything I wanted, skate shoes, fucking wheels, whatever it was. I was like, Mom, I have to fucking have it. I was that dickhead kid, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, I fucking have to have this shit, dude.
Right.
If not, I'm fucking not cool, whatever.
So was I.
You know.
Yeah.
So she'd fucking make it happen.
She
you know.
found a way.
You know. So now I realize later, I'm like, fuck, dude. I was about to beat my ass if I was Luke.
Yeah.
You know.
What's
So-
amazing that y'all don't know is that now that Live Fit's built, one of the first things you do when you got money was you took care of your mom, retired your mom.
retired
right?
my
Like,
mom. Yeah, now she doesn't have to work, nothing.
Yeah, that-
got in her spot. She's chilling.
That makes me, that's my favorite part of your whole, all the wealth you're gonna make, man, all the cars you already have, you're gonna sell Live Fit for a couple $100 million someday or whatever you're gonna do. My favorite thing about it is that the first thing you did when you made some money is you took care of your mom.
Yeah,
like
100%.
And that's everyone watching this, like it's one of their dreams. Like, wouldn't you love to take care of your mom? All the stuff you went through, being robbed as a kid. I'm pretty sure your store probably, I don't know, did your store ever get robbed or almost robbed?
Try to get robbed, yeah, man.
Try to get robbed?
At
Yeah.
one time we talked about with on Andy's thing, man.
What,
Dude,
what happened there? I don't know about that.
Some guy tried to buy a T-shirt with a fake $5 bill. This Mexican dude.
Okay.
And he was just from a gang that just didn't like Asian people.
Okay.
So I was like, fuck.
So he
dude.
comes in your store with a fake $5
Fake
bill.
5, tries to buy it,
Right.
and I'm like, dude, I can't sell you this. He's like, why? Because I'm a donkey. I'm like, nah, dude, because this is a fucking fake $5 bill. I think he was all drugged up. He was like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm gonna come back and fucking kill all you guys, kill all the fucking nips. That's what they call us, nips.
Mm.
And then I was like, fuck. I knew he was serious. I'm like, all right, man, fuck this shit.
Oh my gosh.
So then my buddy, we had a shotgun.
In the store.
In the store, yeah, he had a shotgun and a Glock, but we loaded the shotgun, cocked it back, and just had the safety on. That's how fucking scary the shit was.
Oh my gosh.
And my friend Bruce was like, if this fool comes back, just point that shit that way. You don't have to aim, just fucking point and shoot. It'll fucking blow the whole fucking window off. I was like, oh, fuck,
Were you
dude.
scared?
I was scared I was fucking about to shit my pants, but I was ready. That's the thing, I was fucking ready, dude. I was like, all right, this fool
The
comes
whole
back,
day
I'm
you're
gonna
the,
fucking
every dude
blast
that
this
walks through the
motherfucker,
door,
yeah,
you literally have a gun right next to you.
under the keyboard.
Just just get this, everybody. We're going to segue now into where he is now, but like, just so you get this. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. On some level I am and I'm not. What's happened now is the modern day Nike. It's the modern day Nike came from this. Do you understand that? Like, when you go Google him or you research him, it's the modern day Nike. It's like you're, and by the way, I think you're more viral and innovative and creative and have a more loyal following than them. So you're talking about somebody who grew up in a band, skating. He drops out of Long Beach State, just so you know. I mean, like, pretty close to graduating. You probably
Yeah.
could have graduated if you went, like, what, 6 more months or something, probably,
Yeah.
right? He leaves Long Beach State. He's in a store where he's getting robbed with fake $5 bills. His business would spike initially when people were killed, right? And he ends up building this modern day massive brand. So just think about what you're capable of when this man's done this. And there's this combination of unique things you've built. You've got this artistic, I think everyone who wins in business takes advantage of some birth blessing and then builds skills after it. So like for you, my analysis is you were born with a birth blessing of artistry, of creativity, right? Like, skating's an art to me. I skated too. So skating's an art. Playing in a band is an art. Creating these designs you've created is an art. I think at your heart you're an artist, but that's not enough. Then you learned how to close. Then you got some mentoring. Then you learned to be an entrepreneur, which you already had that kind of desire because you come from nothing, so you want to make money, right? Like scarcity, I want more of this.
Exactly.
World-class mom who sows belief into you and love all the time. Like just loving a child like you were loved by your mom gives you confidence. Like even as I say that, just so you know, badass tattoo guy, your face just changed, right? When I talk about how much your mom loves you, right? Like that's this, when the story of your life, and you're engaged in this beautiful woman you're going to marry, the central figure of your life till this moment is your mom. She's the one, if I turn the pages of the book of your life, is your mom, right?
Yep.
And so I love that, bro. Like, and your mother went from like, I've read about like literally no food, eating like anything she could find to eat, right? Like, is that not true? Like, your mother would like, what would she do? Like to eat, like
Dude,
literally.
I remember the story because I asked her.
Yeah.
I remember her mom, my grandma, during when they were at the, what do you call it, the labor camps?
Yes.
Because they only get fed one time or twice. They would try to they see a fucking lizard, she would snag it and fucking like kill it and put it in her pocket and then later distribute it to the rest of the kids
So it's-
later just so they can eat.
I heard that.
Knowing
bro.
though that if they did get caught, execution right away. But it's like fucking eat or fucking, you know, just survive every day.
Isn't it amazing that your mother, bro, like
No, it's fucking trippy, dude.
And her son becomes this.
Yeah,
like,
it's wild.
I just like I hope people listen to like, if this is possible, what's possible for me or my children, right? Like, or my future, like your past, your upbringing, the tragedies you've gone through, they don't define you. Like, look what this man's become. So we got to fast forward just because of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So you're in the shirt store. I know eventually he buys you out because things are blowing up.
Yep.
And now Live Fit's taken off. So now you're a businessman. Now, and here's what happens once you're there, just so you all know. Now you're riddled with like tons of false starts. You thought you had a business, then you didn't, probably, right? You thought you had a business, then you didn't. So when do you like, is there a point where like you hired your first employee for Live Fit? Like when was that?
I think from 2012 to 2013, that was when I sold the t-shirt store
Okay, so we're
fully
not even
off.
talking that long ago.
Yeah, no,
Right.
Live Fit.
So you're like 25-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 25 was with the birth of my first, like when Live Fit became an LLC and Live Fit Apparel established in California.
Crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah, so
okay.
that was like about 6 years ago.
Okay.
I was operating out of a small ass fucking like warehouse, probably 1,000 square feet, you know?
Okay.
Doing a lot of shit by myself and then having just a help from a few friends.
Okay.
And then officially hired on like, we didn't even know what the fucking role was, you know, just people to help do this and this, and it just grew from there, you know?
Grew.
And from that point, from 2012, 13 to now, we had the most craziest fucking growing pains. You know, we dealt with other shit that I never thought.
Like what?
We just closed the report of the federal IRS and the California state tax audit. We finished nothing, so we're fucking clear of that.
But that's a stressor.
Yeah, we've dealt with patent trademark trolls and just dude, a lot of legal shit that was just like, man, I can't believe this is even still legal, you know?
Yes.
Learning that route and then dealing with ex-employees and just people
Frustrated people,
haters,
yeah,
frustrated people,
litigation, probably, whatever.
You know,
Yeah.
I had a fucking employee. We terminated her because of disruptive behavior, spreading rumors about another employee. She turned around and tried to claim that we fired her because she was a lesbian. We're like, what the fuck? And to fight a civil case in California is pretty hard, you know?
difficult.
So we're like, are you fucking serious? But luckily we had a lot of the backup and paperwork to say, no, she's just fucking lying, you know?
And there's no way owning a t-shirt store prepares you for that,
No,
right?
no
And
way.
this is what everyone, this is entrepreneurs, listen to me, okay? This is what stops most people. They hear these things, they think, well, I don't know about how all that stuff works. Nobody does, okay? What happens is you just get into these situations and you navigate through them. Now, because I'm a person of faith, I actually think God just will prepare you once you're in it. Like, you didn't know what the litigation, you probably didn't even have a lawyer back in the day, right? You started to have a lawyer, like, this is my lawyer. So it's like, the way business works is you just keep stepping into dark places and eventually figure them out. And then there's another light and another light, and then there's a setback, and then there's another light. And it's your guts, okay? It's your courage, it's your drive, it's your dream, it's your mission that takes you through these things you know nothing about. I've had the same things. It's like, I know nothing about these things, right? So you create this thing. Let's talk a second about what's caused it to grow. Because we know what some of the obstacles were. And by the way, the bigger you get, the more obstacles. So what do you have, like 30 employees now? It's roughly around
30 employees.
Okay, 30
Exactly,
employees, which is a big business. How big's your facility now? Not 1,000 square feet.
32,000 square feet.
32,000. So in 5 years, you 32 times the size of your business.
Yeah.
In terms of just the square footage, right?
Right.
Imagine this, you guys. Think about this for a minute. And it started in Facebook, kind of that in realm. And let's talk about this for a few minutes. Okay. What are some of the keys that's grown Live Fit? What would you say the number one key was?
Man, there's so many factors, but if I were to choose one, I'd just say the relatability of like the culture, you know, that generation of people that are into fitness and into that, but still like surfing, like skating, and are still into like that subculture a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's like a safe haven for them to relate to, because before we were even here, there was no brand that was really offering that. Yeah, Nike does skateboarding, this and that, but they don't target like that real experience, you know?
Correct. So this is the lesson, because I agree with you on Live Fit. This is what I've started to find. I found this in my own business too. 10, 15, 20 years ago, you could have a vanilla brand. There was this kind of something, and you had sponsors, and I know you have sponsors too. My bet is most of the business you generate is not from your sponsors, from your athletes. It's from you. It's from the culture, okay?
Yeah.
And so now, this is great news for all of you.
Little guys can win big time against big guys now because people don't just buy products, they buy cultures, they buy environment, they buy mission, okay? Big thing people buy is mission. What's this stand for? What's this about? What's this represent, okay? What's this, because I see all kinds of guys that wear your brand that didn't grow up in Long Beach, man, okay? But they love what it represents, right? And so you obviously have a lot to do with that for a second, okay? So just elaborate on that for a minute. What do you think it represents, and how important is it that you're constantly feeding that to people too? Are you conscious of feeding what it represents, the culture, the mission of the company?
Yeah.
How do you think about that often, and how do you deliver it?
Like with me and like my team of athletes, we're fairly, I'd say on the younger side of the realm. And when we preach like the whole fit lifestyle, eating healthy, living healthy, we're not blacking out the other dark side where we like to have fun, we like to have a few drinks, we like to do this and that, like to still go to fucking hardcore shows and mosh on fools, like
have fast cars and
have fast cars
pretty
and have
people
fun,
around you or whatever.
Like there's like this culture where I can do all this shit and still fucking live a healthy life.
Yes.
So and that's what we're pushing, and yeah, I am always aware of that. So
and you've done it through social media a lot too, right? So here, the first thing is this: if you're going to grow your business, you're going to grow your brand. One of the core messages has to be: this is what I want to get at. This is what I want to tell you that I noticed about you. I'm going to give you something I've not heard someone else tell you. Okay. I think that there's this culture, there's this environment, there's this mission, and then there's this like iconic figure who represents it, which is you. Okay. All of that's wonderful. Okay, and I think it's a huge part of it. But this is what I think all companies that have exploded, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Amazon or you or my buddy, I'm wearing his shirt, Andy Frisella at First Form. Yeah, they have a guy that represents it. Let me tell you what they're great at. You ready? They're great at telling their story. They're great at telling a story about what they represent. So it's not just the representation, it's telling the story. So there's a story behind all of it. You're an amazing storyteller in addition to your art. And I think the way you tell the story is essentially through social media to some extent, right? So we're going to talk about this. If you have any business, financial, I don't care if it's tech, whatever it is, if you're going to grow it, it needs to have a brand. The good news is the brand can be the story you tell.